This is Jocko podcast number 33 with Echo Charles and me, Jocko Willink. Good evening, Echo.
Good evening.
People say there is a line. There's a line between good and evil, right and wrong, between light and dark. And that's a nice, clean way to think of things. But the line can be hard to recognize. It can get blurry. It can get twisted by emotion and passion and by one's own ego. And in war, that line is tested. It's pressed. It becomes even more blurry. It gets crossed and violated and sometimes abandoned. And we can see that throughout history, and we've talked about it here in the Japanese slave camps in Rwanda and My Lai. Those are a few examples, but there are thousands of them. And I've seen the line. And I've seen men approach the line, driven, filled with fury and with hate. And that fury needs an outlet. And if it gets a purchase, it can become unstoppable. But it can also be controlled, because there is a counter to all that evil. There is the man that steps up and says, no, not today, not here, not now. We will not do that. And the dichotomy of leadership and the dichotomy of war is so hard to balance. Soldiers are trained and tasked to kill. And yet they are also trained to be humane and fair and moral and good. So how does a warrior reconcile those opposing forces, that dichotomy? How does he know to balance? God damn. Thoughts rush through my mind as I try to decide what to do. Women, old men, and kids, obviously non-combatants. But this is a free fire zone. There are not supposed to be civilians in this area. Yeah, but dinks occasionally ignore those warnings about free fire areas. Maybe they're the point element for Viet Cong or NVA traveling behind them. Maybe they're supposed to give the warning if stopped. It's happened before. In that case, some of my men could come under fire and be killed or wounded. 4-6 killed that one dink last evening, and he had a Thompson. There was a whole squad of Kong in that group. There was some incoming fire when we made the LZ. A dink tried to cross the dike last night. These people look innocent enough. They may be carrying supplies for the Kong in the area, food and or ammo. It's a free fire zone. Everyone is supposed to be considered enemy. I'm responsible for my men. They'll get killed if I make the wrong decision. These dinks coming toward us mean nothing to me. My men mean everything. What if the dinks aren't innocent? My men depend on me to keep them alive. I spoke softly to the men around me. It's a lick on them. When I give the order, open fire. I brought up the M16 to sight in on the dinks. Spag was standing to my right, his M60 machine gun supported on his hip by a sling around his neck and shoulder. He reached over and touched my arm. His whispered voice reflected the agony of doubt in his face. "No, sir, you can't. Kids, women." He motioned toward the file of people coming towards us. I felt ashamed. Spag was right. "Wait one," I whispered to the men around me. "I'll call for them to surrender." I felt relieved. Capturing them was the best solution. If they were the point for a VC group, I would just make sure none of us was exposed to fire when we captured this point. The dinks were almost to the intersection. I stepped through the brush with some of my men. Dung Lui, I warned. They were only 10 to 20 meters from us. They all glanced at us, standing with our weapons trained on them. We had them dead to rights. They had no cover and no place to run to. A perfect capture situation. Almost in mid-stride, they all moved with astonishing speed. The two boys in the point split up. The one ran past us, heading down the trail past the schoolhouse. The other boy, the woman, the old men started running back toward the bridge. Stop! Dung Lui, I yelled to no avail. I could not order the men to run after them. It could be a trap. Neither could I let them get away. Why were they running? In the split second those thoughts ran across my consciousness, I gave the order to open fire. An irrevocable wave of death swept in front of us. After the initial burst of gunfire, I yelled, "Cease fire." The two women survived long enough to cross the bridge and enter one of the hooches. 3 of my men crossed over the bridge and threw grenades in the hooches. We hurriedly looked over the bodies on the trail. Since they were lying in the open, we had no desire to be caught exposed. The men reported that some of the dead had been carrying hand grenades in their ammo packs. I felt somewhat relieved. Those supplies could not have been for anyone but the Kong. I received a report from the squad down the trail. The firing had alerted them barely fast enough to fire at the teenager running toward them down the trail. Someone hit him in the shoulder and knocked him down. Surprisingly, the boy had jumped up and run past the squad to safety somewhere in the brush. I had no pleasure in reporting to Delta 6 that we had killed 6 dinks and 1 wounded. I knew he would ask how many weapons we had captured. I stared at the gray horizon for a long time before answering that the dinks were not carrying weapons, only supplies and grenades. I felt low. This putrid war. I thought of so many ways I could have done it differently. So easy to think afterward. After all, now I knew there was no dink squad behind on the trail. This episode would be the darkest of my career. I called my men together for a march up the slight hill to Delta 6's position, forcing the dinks out of my mind. Now that's from a book that we're looking at tonight. It's called The Killing Zone: My Life in the Vietnam War by Frederick Downs. Now, Vietnam, it was a hard war, obviously a wretched war, for many reasons. And the My Lai massacre is almost the apex, almost the pinnacle. It almost seems like the essence of the war in many respects. At least it's viewed that way, and it did have a huge strategic impact. It was devastating to the war effort, and something that should always be remembered is that tactical operations can have strategic impact. Like Hackworth said, the My Lai massacre probably did more to end the war and hasten our departure from Vietnam than anything our communist enemy did. And in a similar vein, in the war I was in the mistreatment of the prisoners in Abu Ghraib prison in Iraq, and the photographs that showed that mistreatment likely did more to fuel the insurgency in that country than anything Al-Qaeda did. Tactical actions can have strategic impact, and that actually happens in business too. One bad customer experience for a customer that's got some reach, and there can really be a strategic impact. And what the frontline troops do really does matter. And what the frontline troops do is based on how they are led. And clearly, in My Lai, there was a total lack of leadership. especially from the moral and ethical perspective. But this was not the norm. Not by any stretch. And like I said, it's viewed sometimes as the representation of what the Vietnam War was like, but it's not. And I said this when we talked about My Lai. Yeah, America has done monstrous things in our history. But we most certainly are not monstrous. We are an amazingly benevolent nation, especially now, perhaps even to our own detriment. But that's why I wanted to talk about this book, The Killing Zone, to show the challenges of the Vietnam War and how American troops handled those challenges and pressures on a day-to-day basis, and how they sometimes cross that line, if only for a moment, but then most of the time brought themselves back from the brink of darkness into the light. Now let's go back to the book here. Going to the beginning, when Fred Downs, young lieutenant in the Army, is flying into Vietnam. At 23:30 hours, the Continental Big Bird with the golden tail DC-8 dropped through the night sky into the landing pattern over the black landscape of Vietnam. 23 hours earlier, 165 of us had been crammed aboard the commercial jet at the airport near San Francisco. I looked around the cabin at the officers and enlisted men who had come from all over the United States to catch this flight from San Francisco. How would they return? How would I return? I had graduated 6 months earlier from the U.S. Army's OCS program at Fort Benning, Georgia, and now I was soon to be leading men into combat. I was 23 years old, and I had been trained to lead. Physically, I thought I was ready. Mentally, I was as confident of myself as any young officer could be. But underneath my confidence were the ever-present questions, worry, and curiosity about war and my role in it. I was eagerly looking forward to finding answers. I would not have to wait long. So we've talked about that before. When you're stepping into a leadership role, there's a good chance you're not going to feel 100% confident. And that's okay. So he gets to Vietnam. He gets assigned to 4th Division. And he hadn't heard of 4th Division. He hadn't seen it in the papers. And he kind of was asking, hey, why haven't I seen that in the papers? What are they doing? And he said, there's no reporters up there where they're working. It's too rough for them. And he's kind of saying, I want to make sure I get it on. And some of the old timers are telling him, one of them says, you'll get a belly full of fighting up there, son, if that's what you want. So it's one of those be careful what you wish for scenarios. And I thought this was pretty interesting. We talk about Hackworth and the hardcore recondos as the salute and reply. The reply is no fucking slack. So here's what they had here. It was SOP to salute in the company area, but not in the field. When an enlisted man saluted, he would say, "Golden Dragon, sir." The officer would return the salute with "Right of the line." I asked about this. They told me that the 1st to the 14th, that's the division he's with, the 1st to the 14th was an old infantry regiment steeped in tradition. During the Boxer Rebellion in China, the unit had fought bravely. Afterward, they adopted the symbol of a golden dragon. The other part of the salute came from some battle in the Civil War. Right before a large battle, a staff officer asked a general where to put the 1st to the 14th. The general had roared back, "Put them to the right of the line, where they belong." The right of the line is where a leader traditionally puts his best men and units. This comes down through military history. When a man fought with the shield and sword, the right arm or sword arm was unprotected. The best fighter was put to the right to protect the sword arm of the man on his left. Only the most trusted and best fighters held the position to the right. Legit. So he's there in the headquarters area for a little while, and then he gets his indoctrination and then gets flown out. He's flies out into the field, into where he's going to be operating out of. He gets up there, and this is straight out of a movie right here. Bugs swarmed around my face. I squatted and looked at the men, who looked right back at me. It was my first view of American GIs who had spent several days in the jungle. I stood there in sparkling crisp fatigues, brand new boots, new rifle, clean shaven, fresh haircut. I even smelled clean. My helmet camouflage cover didn't have a mark on it, nor did I. The two men opposite me were filthy. Their fatigues were torn, and they had scratches all over their skin, 2 or 3 days of growth on their beard, and dark circles under their eyes. They looked tired, and they smelled the high heaven. So that's right out of a movie. The boot lieutenant coming in to take over. He's in his pressed camis, looking all squared away, and these guys look like they're living in hell. And they introduced the company commander, and this guy, you're going to see throughout the book, this guy, Captain Sells, was an ROTC officer, 26 years old, son of a father killed in Korea. So that's, the guy's dad got killed in Korea, and during the Vietnam War, he's joining up and leading men into combat. He's a company commander. And if you remember from the book Platoon Leader, you remember he didn't even meet the company commander. So his direct boss didn't even meet him for weeks. He'd been in the field for weeks before he even met him. And here's this company commander, obviously much more squared away, walks him around, introduces him to everybody. He's giving him a heads up. This is the way it's supposed to be. And, he's getting told, look, there's enemy all around. And you might have heard in that intro piece that I read, I was talking about Delta 6. And here's a little piece about that. He informed me that his radio signal was Delta 6. So that's the Delta company commander's Delta 6. Lieutenant Smart, the first platoon leader, was Delta 16. The second platoon leader was Delta 26. Sixes were the commanders of the unit. And this is a tradition that holds true in the Army and the Marine Corps today. And it's pretty cool when you're in the field, you would hear someone call for the 6. And that means that we want to talk to the guy that's in charge out there. Their seconds in command were known as 5s. For instance, Delta 15 was the first platoon sergeant. And this is, goes on to talk a little bit more about Captain Sells, who's asking him about his family. He's getting to know him. And he's, Downs had a wife and 2 little girls back in Illinois. And so, again, you're getting the impression that Sells is a guy that's trying to get to know his people and learn about them, which is the way what a leader should be doing. Now these guys are out. And he's talking again. This is something straight out of a movie. Darkness quickly engulfed us. My hooch mates watched in astonishment as I pulled out mosquito netting and spread it over my poncho liner and air mattress. They were aghast that I carried so much extra weight. No, I answered. This is all the good stuff. Their amazement grew as I revealed 3 changes of underwear and fatigue clothes. Wait until the next day, they scoffed, when the sun and heavy pack will drag me down. The jungle would exact a toll for every ounce I carried. We'll see, I answered. Not a good answer. Lieutenant Smart said, yeah, you'll see. You'll see that the only change of clothes you'll carry is an extra pair of socks. You'll learn to live in one set of jungle fatigues until they rot off you or rip too badly to wear. That actually reminds me, when we were in my first deployment to Iraq, we had 3 sets of camis and just wore them, rotated them. In Ramadi, the op tempo was so high and the conditions of fighting, we had to order new camis. Within a couple weeks of being there, guys had destroyed camis. You run across the street, they're getting dragging people, and they were just ruining their camis. So that was another indicator in Ramadi that we were in a totally different scenario than I was on my first deployment to Iraq. Mm-hmm. Back to the book. My first days on combat patrol introduced me to the vicissitudes of war. 10-foot deep punji pits. Wait-a-minute vines that collected around the feet and legs until their combined strength stopped you, and you had to say, wait a minute. while you untangled or cut yourself loose. The hot sun beating down on us as we marched around with 70-pound packs, the sweat pouring off us, the bugs so thick around our faces that we sometimes inhaled them, and the physical agony of forcing tired muscles to keep going. It was a search and destroy mission, which meant we searched all the hooches we found and then burned them down. Whether a single farmer's hooch or a whole village, all were burnt. The few Vietnamese we found in the area were women, children, and old men who had been left behind. When we started to burn their particular hooch, they would start wailing, crying, and pulling at our clothes. We didn't harm the people, but the orders were to destroy all the dwellings, so we did. The first time I saw a Vietnamese family go into hysterics when their hooch was set on fire, I was unsure of whether burning their home would accomplish our mission. The mission was to deny the enemy use of the hooches, to destroy any food we found, and to teach the people a lesson about supporting the enemy. But I quickly got used to it and accepted that this was one way to win the war. And that's, if you talk to anybody knowledgeable about true counterinsurgency, this is not a great plan to go in and basically abuse the populace. Now, if you know that they're supporting the insurgents, sure, you want to disrupt that, but oftentimes they're not supporting the insurgents because they want to. They're supporting the insurgents because they're fear for their lives. That's the way it was in Iraq when I was there. So back to the book. Sheldon Brand took the opportunity later that day to explain in this unit, everyone called the enemy, and ultimately all outsiders, dinks. So that's their word that they use. And I found this interesting. He says ultimately all outsiders. And you've heard me and you've heard Leif, and in the book we talk about Moosh. That's what we called the enemy. We called the enemy Moosh. But what's interesting is here it says all outsiders, and that's exactly what we did. When we were getting resistance from, up the chain of command, down the chain of command, guess what we called them? Moosh. We'd say, oh, the boss is saying this. I can't believe that, Moosh. So it became the word that we used to all outsiders. And that's unit cohesion, and there's some dehumanization of the enemy there, obviously, but the fact that you end up using the same slang word to describe anybody that's against you, right, is interesting. Back to the book. It turned out that the enemy started calling us dinks first because it was an insulting or demeaning term that meant hairy man from the jungle. We had just turned the word around and started calling them dinks. At least that was the story. I don't know if that's true or not. I never didn't do any research on that one. I saw the face of the enemy for the first time. He had been machine gunned down by one of our gun crews. The powerful weapon had thrown a hail of bullets into the brush where we had spotted him. When we got to his position, I saw for the first time the death of a soldier. The machine gun crew had done a good job. The young soldier's green combat uniform body was riddled with bullets. He was sprawled across his bicycle with his face toward the sky. At last I had before me the enemy I had been trained to destroy. He was a young man for whom the war and life had ended. One evening a jet was returning to base and needed a target to get rid of his unexpended bomb load. The captain called the forward air controller and gave him the coordinates of a sniper 300 meters away who had been pestering us off and on for 3 days. As the jet pulled up after dropping napalm on the sniper's position, we could hear the pop-pop of the sniper firing at the jet. The men talked about the gall of that sniper as I watched the napalm burn itself out. I wondered what would drive a man to stand up to death in so remarkable a manner. Again, you're dealing with a hardened enemy. You're getting napalm dropped on your position, and as you burn to death, you're trying to shoot down a jet fighter. Back to the book. Sheldon Brand was worth his weight in gold to me in running that platoon. He even introduced me to the platoon motto. It's a lick. A lick is a lick on a young man's ass, Lieutenant. You remember when you were a kid and you did something wrong or something got fucked up that you got the blame for? The old man would give you a licking with a switch or a belt? Yeah, I sure remember getting lickings. Well, when something goes wrong, it's a lick on you. You see? Anything that goes wrong will give you a lick. And over here, you'll get plenty of licks. My RTO was the other most important man to the platoon. His job was to carry the radio and stick to me like a shadow. The radio was our link with literally everything outside our platoon, from supplies to survival. Without a working radio and a good RTO, a platoon leader and the platoon were as good as lost in this war. My RTO, man, a skinny kid 5 feet 11 inches tall, was next to perfect for his job. He loved to know what was going on, and his job was akin to the central switchboard operators. So that's the RTO. That was actually when I was an enlisted SEAL. That's what I was. So I always had that same attitude. When you're the RTO, you always know what's going on, because the officer's telling you, you're right next to him, you're listening to what he's saying, so you always know what's going on. And that was a real good education for me. Growing my whole career, always being next to the guy that was running the platoon. Talking a little bit about the troops here. My squad leaders were: first squad Delk, a tall cowboy type from Wyoming; second squad Porter, a slightly built black from East St. Louis; third squad Jose, a skinny, short, swarthy Puerto Rican; fourth squad Gallagher, a medium built redhead from the New England states; and of course there was the platoon medic, Doc. The platoon makeup was whites, blacks, Puerto Ricans, Mexicans, Americans, and an Indian, and a Japanese American, all of them from 18 to 21 years old. In a combat platoon, we were evaluated by our peers on our ability to help the platoon survive and not on our racial backgrounds. A combat platoon pulled together and was tight with each other, with no room for the soldier who wouldn't do his share. So it's always good to just point that out. These are just people from just a cross-section of America. And these are pretty stereotypical, right? A cowboy from Wyoming. This is stereotypical stuff. And that's one thing that the military... So when I grew up in New England, right? When I joined the Navy and I got to California and I went to the Enlisted Man's Club on NAB Coronado, the Gator Gardens, back in the day, I was 19 years old. And I showed up, because there's a club. So it's a club on base, right? And so I'm going to go there. People are saying, hey, we're going to go to the club. So I go, okay, well, let's go see what's going on there. So I walk over to the club, and as I'm kind of standing outside, I see two guys walk by with jeans on, with cowboy boots, with big belt buckles and cowboy hats and like a Wrangler shirt. And I was kind of thinking to myself, is there some kind of, is it Halloween? Are these guys getting dressed up for something? And again, this is pre-internet, man. I mean, and then I see a couple more guys go by, and it turned out it was country western night, but
at the club that you
at
went
the
to?
club. But nice. I had never seen a person in, I come from a small town in Connecticut, and there's just no cowboys up there. Yep. I mean, and interestingly, there's farms, and there's people that raise cattle, and there's people that grow, have farms, but they don't have cowboy boots, and they don't wear cowboy hats. And so it's just, that's what I was thinking about when I read this, is just how you take all these different people from all over the place. They had no idea. You have no idea what other people are like. And again, this is pre-internet. When I joined the Navy, we didn't get to Google. We didn't watch YouTube videos, because you're exposed to the entire planet and galaxy through YouTube.
Yeah. First time you saw a real cowboy, huh?
Mm-hmm. It is. I thought they were dressed up.
Yeah,
I thought they were dressed up. Yeah.
It's crazy.
It is kind of crazy. And then, I ended up, in TU Bruiser, we had all kinds of guys from Texas, and there's all kinds of cowboys down in Texas. Chris Kyle was like a legit rodeo dude. And Leif's a cowboy. Leif's an absolute cowboy. Yeah, absolutely. There's all kinds of cowboys in there.
Yeah.
So, all right, now we're going to advance a little bit, and this is the first time that Downs is actually in charge. He did a little turnover with the former platoon commander. He takes charge of the platoon, and he's doing security for the bridges, for some bridges that are out kind of away from the main camp. And they're out there to prevent landmines and gather intel and kind of set up a checkpoint. And they're actually staying out there. So they would set up by these bridges. And as they're getting set up for the first time, I'm going to the book. An explosion ripped the air behind me, followed immediately by a scream. My body instinctively threw itself against the sandbags as my mind shouted, "Mortar attack." My eyes registered the scene of men frozen in shocked wonderment, their eyes staring behind me. Man was directly in front of me, and the track men were off in the background, crouching where they were when the explosions went off. So they're actually out there with some tracked vehicles. Quickly turning around, my eyes swept an awful catastrophe. One of the claymores had gone off, shattering forever the lives of the three men in front of it. Jesus Christ. Was it a mortar? No, one of our claymores went off. Get those men quick. No, wait, there's another claymore out there. What the fuck set it off? What about the other one? So imagine this. You get to a position and you want to put out claymore mines. And if you don't know what a claymore mine is, it's a directional blasting mine that you set off by command detonation. So you have a little thing that you squeeze, and when you squeeze this thing, it sends an electrical charge down the wire into the claymore, detonates a blasting cap, the claymore explodes, and everything in front of it's going to die. Well, they had set up the claymores, and then they were going to put some barbed wire out. And as they were putting the barbed wire out, there was a storm, electrical storm, thunderstorm, and the static electricity in the air actually set off the claymore. So it killed, or it did some serious damage. Back to the book. Only a few seconds had passed since the explosion. One of my men and I dashed to the other claymore, frantically fumbling, unscrewing the plug, and holding the blasting cap, throwing it away from the claymore. Then I rushed back to the radio. 2 men were applying first aid. The other positions were covered by the men assigned to them. They had stayed in place during the action. Good training, I thought as I fumbled with my map. It was folded in a plastic radio bag all of us used to carry maps in. Delta 6, this is 1-6, over. 1-6, this is Delta 6, over. This is 1-6, I need dust off. There's been an accident resulting in 3 peanuts, over. We tried to say nothing over the radio that could be understood by the enemy. Thus, we used code words for certain things. A Kool-Aid was a dead soldier, and a peanut was a wounded soldier. This is Delta 6, what the hell happened, over. This is 1-6, static electricity in the air set off a claymore while 3 trackmen were putting out barbed wire, over. This is Delta 6. What's your position? Over. Now, what would he ask me that for? I was on the bridge he'd assigned to me. Let's see. We're here, so I read writing up real easy, just like all the training. So he's looking at his map. He's trying to figure out where he is. Of course, that was my first responsibility, where men had been hurt. So maybe that accounted for what happened next in spite of training. Lieutenant, you've got to get a dust off out here quick. This man's got a bad head wound, said one soldier as they brought the wounded over to me. Dirty black clouds with lightning crashing around added to the confusion as the wind howled over from all directions. Huge raindrops started to spatter down. This is 1-6. I'm at coordinates 298028. Over. I read them out. This is Delta 6. Are you sure of that? Over. This is 1-6. Let's see. Yeah, that's it. All right, there. 1-6, you better check that again. According to what you gave me, you're in the South China Sea. Over. Ooh, did he sound mad? God damn, I've done this a million times. The thought ran through my mind as a sweat broke out. The wounded were groaning, the storm was reaching gigantic proportions, and the track sergeant was demanding to know where that dust off was. Concentrate, Fred. Concentrate, I said to myself while staring at the meaningless blob of colors, whirls, and numbers. So he's looking at his map, he's just trying to figure it out. Suddenly everything gelled in perfect clarity. Delta 6, this is 1-6. You're right, my coordinates are 288028. I need a dust off fast. Over. 1-6, this is Delta 6. I know where you are. I just wanted to see if you could figure it out. I already called the dust off. So Captain Sells, that's who he was talking to. Captain Sells, that's Delta 6, the commander of the company. And even in this pressure situation, he's trying to make sure that the guy is thinking. He's in the opportunity to think for the first time under pressure. And he already called the dust off, but he's still putting the test to him and seeing how he operates under that kind of stress and pressure. Another following situation, they're kind of sitting in this location and they see a woman start to approach where they had some equipment, and looked like she was going to steal some stuff. And it's kind of no big deal. Okay, she's going to steal some ponchos or something. Well, then they see her. What she picks up is a case of grenades, and they're thinking, wait a second, now this just got really bad. Because if she was stealing a poncho, okay, no big deal. But if she's stealing grenades, that's stuff that's going to be used to come back and kill them. But again, because we have a guy with a conscience, a guy that sees where the line of darkness is and he doesn't want to cross it. So instead of just shooting her, which he could have done, he loads a magazine of tracer rounds into his weapon, and he starts shooting them around her, kind of warning shots, and then eventually starts shooting. He's a good shot. He starts shooting at the little rope that holds the case that she's holding on to. He starts shooting at that rope, shoots at it like 5 or 6 times, finally hits the rope, kind of hits her hand. She drops it. She runs off. Again, just trying to show the discretion that this guy's using as a real contrast to the My Lai episode. Now, speaking of that, a little later on, they roll up some prisoners. One is an old man and one is a young man. And this old gray-haired sergeant starts going after him. So they got these 2 prisoners. They're captured. And here's the sergeant. "So you're the fuckers that zapped my buddies in the tank," the old gray-haired sergeant snarled. Without warning, he swung a heavy fist into the face of the old man, knocking him down. The other fist swung into the face of the younger man, knocking him down beside the old man. The sergeant was screaming and bellowing as he pummeled the 2 men on the sand. They rolled into balls for protection, but were hampered by their tied hands. I ran from the road, yelling my 2 men to pull the sergeant off the prisoners. They grabbed him by his shoulders as he fought them to get back to the Vietnamese. He lashed out with his foot at the prisoners, catching one of them in the side. "What the hell are you doing, Sergeant?" "Those men are my prisoners," I exclaimed. His face was red with fury as he yelled back at me, "You had no right to take those stinking Kong prisoners." He smelled of beer that he had drunk. "You should have killed those motherfuckers like they killed that other tank crew." "Fuck! These men are tied up. We don't know who they are," I yelled back. I was saved by the sound of Lieutenant Knutson's voice breaking over the argument. "Calm down, Sergeant. Go back to your tent." So that the other lieutenant was the commander of the tanks. Again, I'm pointing this out. He's new in country. He sees somebody beating up a prisoner. They had just lost one of the tanks to a mine earlier, and obviously the gray-haired sergeant's pissed, and he wants to take it out on these guys. But, calmer, cooler heads prevailed in that situation. Now, speaking of mines, back to the book, mines continue to be laid in the road at irregular intervals. It was a fact of life, but the terror of an explosion never failed to send a shiver through our guts no matter how many times we heard them. Whatever we were doing, our heads would jerk around. It was terrifying to hear the explosion, see the ugly gray and black cloud as it ripped into the air, see dark pieces of metal, canvas, machinery, and human beings flying in the blossom of death out from the center of destruction. And this one big mine happens, and he's going to check it out. It hits a truck, it hits a vehicle. I approached the twisted wreck. It was very disheartening to see the smoking wreck which had once been the carrier of human beings. There were wisps of smoke drifting upward from the hulk. As we approached closer, we saw parts of the driver's body mangled beyond recognition in the cab and on the ground. The main portion of the driver was only recognizable because we knew that was what it was supposed to be. My men ran toward the still living being huddled in the rice paddy, mewling over and over that his leg was gone. The scene of desolation brought about the true impact of the Vietnam War to me. There was no enemy to fire at. There was nothing to retaliate against. At a distance, the traffic of vehicles and Vietnamese watched. All that remained was the messy job of cleaning up while thinking that this could happen to us. A small part of our mind tried to retain its sanity by reminding itself over and over that it would never happen to us. It can happen to everyone else, but it would not happen to me. With that in mind, we started scraping up what was left, preparing it for the plastic body bag. Now, eventually they go from guarding the bridges to where they start doing patrols out in the jungle and ambushes out in the jungle, and direct action missions out in the jungle. And at this point, they're out in the jungle. And I'll go to the book. My platoon and I had not shaved for 3 or 4 days. Delta 6 was a bear about shaving. Combat patrol or not. Just because we lived like animals didn't mean we had to look like them, was his way of thinking. Throwing my fatigue jacket across a bush, I grabbed my shaving gear and told Spag and Vicenor to accompany me. We would guard each other as we shaved. So the company commander's coming out, and they're unshaven, and they're like, okay, we got to shave real quick. But again, you can see that Captain Sells has a real influence, and you can see that discipline, it carries over. And when you let it slacken, but then you go visit your troops and they have to get back in line, it brings them back to humanity. It reminds them that because think about it, that shaving is something you do in the military every single day. So when all of a sudden you're out in the field, you start losing that. You start slipping away from that, and other things start slipping away as well. They get into some firefights out there, and at one point he gets wounded, and I'm going to the book. After Holmes had finished bandaging my arm, I put on my fatigue jacket and lit a cigarette. I felt good. I had only been in country a few months, and I had my second Purple Heart. The first one had been from a wound received in October. To top it off, I had been wounded twice in one day, shot in the ear in the morning and hit with a grenade shrapnel in the afternoon. Luck was with me. All 3 wounds had been slight. Now, you can say luck when you get shot in the ear, and you are lucky for sure, but that's a real eye opener, indicating that you realize how close you were to dying. And I had guys get shot in the helmet, and they didn't like it one bit, because that's real close. Someone got real close to getting you. Now, going forward more, there's a battle going on, and the company's out in the field, and they're not directly involved in the battle, so they get told, okay, we want you to go set up where we think the VC is going to run to, where we think they're going to run. You guys set up a blocking force, so that way when the VC runs into you, you ambush them and take them out. So they're kind of maneuvering to go set that up. His platoon is maneuvering to set that up, and we'll go to the book. After 15 minutes or so, we were approximately halfway down the ridge. The captain gave me a call. Dragon 6 had decided it would be better if I halved my platoon, marching the 2 elements in opposite directions in order to cover a larger area. I was dead set against this. My platoon was below strength, and dividing it would be asking 2 reinforced rifle squads to defend hundreds of acres of jungle against a foe of unknown size. So Dragon 6 is above the company commander. This is now the battalion commander. And so now you're getting an order from the battalion commander. So it's, you're a young lieutenant, platoon commander, and you're getting told to do this, and he doesn't feel good about it. Back to the book. But orders were orders, especially from Dragon 6. I passed back the word for Schaldenbrand to come up. I was poring over my map and compass when Schaldenbrand reached me. The battle was full blown. Its sound provided background noise as I briefed Shelley on the situation and our orders. Shit, I don't like it, sir. I know I don't either, but it's a lick. You got your map and compass? Good. So there's all kinds of reasons why they don't like this idea. Obviously, one that he already stated was that, you take your platoon and you cut them in half. That's just, you don't have the same fighting capability at all. I think they had one heavy machine gun in each squad. So now you got, basically they're down to 2 squads because they were under strength. So we're talking 1 heavy machine gun. And by the way, if somebody gets wounded, you got your wounded guy, and if you're going to carry that guy, it takes 2 or 3 guys to carry the guy. So that's 4 guys gone. So you could very easily be outnumbered, outmanned, and outgunned by the enemy. So he doesn't like this idea. On top of that, I will tell you, he doesn't talk about it here. When you split up in a situation like this, it becomes very difficult to do command and control. And now you got 2 elements that are weaker size, and you're no longer able to support each other. That's the premise of cover and move. Cover and move means you want to be close enough that you can support each other. You don't want to split far apart where you can't help each other if something happens. Well, that's what they're getting told to do. They don't like it. But they do it. And maybe he should have protested more, but he's getting orders from the battalion commander, and he says, okay, let's do it. And of course, within a couple minutes of doing it, they lose radio contact. So now they can't hear each other, and they're starting to march apart. Finally, they get radio, they get connected on the radio again, they get comms again, and it sounds like this. 1-5, this is 1-6. Have you figured out where you are yet? This is 1-5, negative. So Shelley with his squad is lost. Doesn't know where he is. Okay. Now, the lieutenant's all set up, though. They're in their position where they're thinking the enemy might come by. They're set up to attack them. And here we go back to the book. Lieutenant, Porter whispered as he reached my side. We hear noises to our front. Men are moving across in front of us in the jungle. Hold on a second, Porter. 1-5, this is 1-6. The sound of the battle should be on your right if you're going in the right direction. Where are the sounds? Over. This is 1-5, negative on the right. The sounds are on the left. Over. 1-5, did you just say the sounds are on your left? I was squeezing the handset so hard my knuckles were white. Affirmative, affirmative. Jesus Christ, 1-5, I hoarsely whispered intensely into the mouthpiece. You're heading in our direction. I could hear the sounds of men moving through the jungle below us. I whispered to Porter, get back down there and tell the men to hold their fire. That may not be dinks after all. Hurry. Porter had heard the conversation with Shelley and quickly turned to carry out my order. He couldn't yell because the sounds were coming from the dink soldiers. His yell would put us in jeopardy. As Porter started toward the crew, the machine gun crew opened fire. The harshness of the gun's multiple explosions ripped across my thoughts as its sound echoed through the handset I was holding next to my ear. The sound of Americans swearing and screaming rebounded from the jungle below and from my handset. Cease fire, I screamed, cease fire, so he can actually hear his guys getting shot by his own guys. We have a blue on blue. Porter and I were running to the gun crew, both of us yelling, cease fire, the sound of their gun blanketing the screams in front of them. Abruptly, the gun quit firing. I yelled into the jungle, Shelley, is that you? Yes, yes, stop firing, don't fire. I was answered by many voices. I stood there an instant. The horrible realization that I had fired on my own men swept over me like a wave from an ice-cold hell. The gun crew looked at me, their faces filled with shock. I ran, leaping and falling down to the brush line where my men were, asking the question, anybody hit for Christ's sake? Gallagher yelled back as I burst into a small clearing. One man, the point man. So there you go, blue on blue. Another reason why if you don't have to separate your forces, you don't. You don't separate your forces unless you have to, and when you do it with extreme caution. And I think every book we talk about blue on blue. It happens in all these books. It happens in my book. And some of these descriptions right here, I recognize those 100%. When he says the horrible realization I'd fired on my own men swept over me like a wave from an ice cold hell. Yeah, I totally recognize that. And the fact that he says the gun crew looked at me, their faces filled with shock. When I explained to my guys in the field like that was a blue on blue, their faces were just complete shock. If you're in the military, if you're in law enforcement, be very careful when you split your forces. It just multiplies the challenges. Sometimes it is necessary, but you got to keep control over it. And now we go to where he's calling for a medevac for his wounded guy. Delta 6, this is 1-6, over. This is Delta 6, over. This is 1-6, I need a dust off for a peanut. We've run into a little action, over. This is Delta 6, what do you mean a little action? What's going on? What happened, over? My knees felt weak and my stomach was sour. This is 1-6. We had a little difficulty with the terrain, and I ambushed 1-5. Over. What? How the fuck did you do that, 1-6? You mean you ambushed your own men? What kind of outfit are you running up there? That's the most asinine thing I've ever heard of. You get your head out of your ass, 1-6, and get that platoon straightened up. You got that. Over. This is 1-6. Affirmative. Over. 1-6, give me your coordinates. The dust-off's on its way. How bad is your peanuts? Over. This is 1-6, not too bad. He'll lose a couple of toes, but everybody else is okay. Over. All right, 1-6, settle down. out. He was more gentle with the last transmission because I'm sure he heard my voice and showed the strain I was feeling. Whatever the reason, I welcomed the sound of his voice. Perhaps he understood better than I thought what had happened. So he comes at him real hard. He realizes that the guy feels horrible, and then he kind of backs off and says, settle down. He also knows he's got to stay in the game. He's got to get him to stay in the game. And there's a nightmare of a video on YouTube of, and there's actually, it's from a documentary, but there was a really bad blue on blue in the first Gulf War where a Apache gunship lit up I think it was a Bradley, some kind of APC.
I saw that.
It's a nightmare, but you can hear the one guy that fired. They're saying, hey, you got to get back in position, hold the line, basically. And he's like, I just killed my own guys. I want to come back. And they're saying negative. And so that's basically what Captain Sells is doing here, saying, hey, listen, okay, I'm pissed, but guess what? Calm down, settle down, get your shit together. And he says out. And by the way, for those folks that aren't military, over, when you say over at the end of a transmission on the radio, it means you expect a reply. When you say out, there's no reply expected. So, like when we end this podcast, I say out because it's over. You don't say anything back to me. It's over. I don't say over, and sometimes you'll hear people say over and out in the military. You don't say that. It doesn't make any sense. So when you hear that in a movie, know that they are cheesy.
Is that kind of like when they hang up the phone on the movie? It goes "Durr," and you hear the dial tone.
Yes,
that doesn't really happen.
That doesn't really happen either.
Yeah, same thing.
I trudged back to the book. I trudged back to my position, 1-5 and his men following. Man handed me a can of coffee. I chain smoked my cigarettes and drank coffee while the platoon expanded into a larger perimeter. I stood facing the mountain, the battle still raging on. 1-5 walked over to me, still shaken from his experience. He told me how he was sorry that he had gotten me in such a dutch with the captain, and we discussed the operation, going over his mistake while we attempted to figure out ways to keep it from happening again if we were ever split up. Shelley and I had been through too much together for me to blame him for what had happened. I told him so, and we let it go at that. We had been lucky. Besides, I blamed myself for what had happened. The responsibility for any unit's actions ultimately rests with its commander. The leader got the glory when things worked out, and he took the blame when they didn't. That went with the job. When it came right down to it, the men were my responsibility, and I had failed them today. Little bit of extreme ownership. If you read the book Extreme Ownership that Leif and I wrote, the opening chapter, that's what it's about. Blue on blue and doing exactly what Lieutenant Downs did right there, taking ownership of what the mistakes were made in the battlefield. Back to the book. There's a couple guys. Well, actually, not yet. They link up with another platoon, and now they're having a conversation. Downs is having a conversation with another officer named Anderson. A dink was lying next to us as we talked. He had a black ace of spades stuck onto his fist. Hey, Anderson, what's that all about? That's so the dinks know what outfit fucked them up over here. Look around. Most of the dinks got those in their hands. Sure enough, the dinks were all holding an ace of spades. That's a good idea, but where'd you get all the aces? One of the guys' moms works in a card store, so he wrote home asking her to send her a couple packs of nothing but the ace of spades. Why did we want to kill dinks? After all, we had mostly been law-abiding citizens back in the world, and we were taught that to take another man's life was wrong. Somehow the perspective got twisted in a war. If the government told us it was all right, and in fact a must to kill members of another government's people, then we had the law on our side. It turned out that most of us liked to kill other men. Some of the guys would shoot at a dink as much as they would at a target. Some of the men didn't like to kill a dink up close. The closer the killing, the more personal it became. Others in the platoon liked to kill in close. A few even liked to torture the dinks if they had a prisoner, or cut the dead bodies with knives in a frenzy of aggression. A few didn't like to kill at all and wouldn't fire their weapons except to protect their buddies. Mostly, we all saw it as a job and rationalized it in our own way. Over it all ran the streak of anger or fear that for brief moments ruled us all. My job as platoon leader was to control the spectrum of emotions, to guide the men toward survival. I didn't believe in torturing or in allowing a dink to die a lingering death. In the jungle, we never took prisoners if we could help it. Every day we spent in the jungle eroded a little more of our humanity away. Prisoners could escape to become our enemy again, hence, no prisoners. The philosophical arguments in favor of man's ability to resist the slide into barbarism sound noble and rational in a classroom or at a cocktail party. But when the enemy is bearing down on you, bent on taking your life away from you, it's not his country against your country. Not his army against your army. Not his philosophy against your philosophy. It's the fact that that son of a bitch is trying to kill you, and you'd better kill him first. That's a reality right there. Now, going back to tactics a little bit, back to the book, there was a spot about midway down the mountain marked in blue. That meant something bigger than a stream. If I were an enemy commander, that would be a perfect spot for a camp. High mountains on three sides, a good water supply, thick jungle growth, and an escape path in any directions. If he decided on that location, the enemy commander would be counting on attack from the valley up towards his location. He would have his back guarded, but not very heavily. Or so I reasoned. I just like that because you can see he's getting his mind in the mind of the enemy. He's thinking about he's looking at the map. He sees stream. He sees valley. He sees good covered positions from three sides. He's thinking, okay, this is what the enemy must be thinking right here. Now, the fighting continues, and as always, I'm burning through book. I mean, this is a 250-page book, and I'm reading. Maybe 20 pages from it. So there's so much action going on and so many good lessons to learn. Obviously, I can't cover them all. That's why you can buy this book yourself, as you should. But here we go. I'm going to a point here where they've been in a firefight. They got 3 wounded. One of the guys lost an arm. One of them's unconscious. And they're they have a helicopter that's come in, and the helicopter's lowered down a cable, and they're lifting the guys out to get them to a medevac situation. Back to the book. The signal was given, and the cable pulled him off the ground. About halfway up, he waved to all of us, grinning like a Cheshire cat. Blood dripped on us. It was a picture I shall always hold in my mind. A man dangling from a cable, holding a stick fastened to a tourniquet on the stump of his leg, waving at his comrades with the other hand. A cigarette dangling from his lips. 1-6. This is getting hairy up here. We're starting to take fire, the pilot reported. Hold on, just one more. Spag and I lifted the unconscious man up while we slid the vest onto him. Someone handed me the cable, which I hooked onto the ring. The unconscious man was winched upward, dangling like a limp doll at the end of a cable. Spag and I stood underneath, watching this final exodus. As the crewman reached out to grab the man, something went wrong. The man had become unhooked and somehow fell through 50 feet of sky towards us. We jumped back as the man fell in a heap at our feet. The medic and I pulled the man over. Fuck. He stopped breathing. He goes on to say, the attrition rate on our side was terrible on our morale. Although we killed and wounded many of the NVA, we never knew how much it hurt them. It seemed there was an unlimited number to take their places. But on our side, when we lost a man, we all knew, and it wore heavily on our minds. The constant marching and fighting demanded 2 things of us, strength and absolute reliability. Now they're moving out on another operation, and there's one of the soldiers named Yoder. Yoder was the point man. He was experienced and full of good humor due to his promotion to door gunner. A good man to have on point any day. He was aggressive and unafraid. Even though he was going in soon, there was no question of putting someone else in his place on point. It was his turn, and he would not have it any other way. So he's getting promoted to door gunner, so he's going to get pulled out of the field. He's going to fly around in a helicopter, relatively safe compared to being in the field. He reminded me of a hillbilly with his coarse language, mannerisms, and humor. I was always asking him when he was going to get that front tooth replaced. That missing tooth made him look more like a hillbilly than anything else. He always laughed and said, "Fuck, sir, I ain't about to let them fucking army dentists work on me. Shit, no, that would be a lick on me." So they continue their patrol, and they're coming up on this kind of flat area, and Yoder crept forward in a crouch, looked back at me and grinned. I grinned back and nodded my head. Yoder stepped over a tree root, holding up part of the small gully bank. At that moment, all hell broke loose as a Chi-Com machine gun strafed the point element. Yoder was hit in the body and fell forward into the gully. The machine gun acted as a key which triggered a complete ambush. We walked into a classical U-shaped ambush, with the machine gun being at the base of the U. So we used to call this a fire sack when you get ambushed and you're completely surrounded by the enemy. And that's where they are. It starts with this machine gun hitting Yoder and then just breaks out. Explosions, machine guns, and rifle bullets ripped through the air and ricocheted off the ground and trees around us. The noise was overwhelming. Men were screaming and yelling, trying desperately to get cover, or screaming when they were hit or thought they were hit, which was almost as terrifying. We still had not seen any of the enemy in the thick growth around us. Most of us in the point played dead. I lay trying to get my thinking organized as to what to do. So you're just taking massive ambush, and you're laying there thinking, what am I going to do? I could hear Yoder crying on the other side of the route where he had fallen. He cried out for me to come and get him. "Lieutenant, I've been hit bad, I'm dying. Please come and get me. Please come and get me." I turned my head in his direction. Twigs and bark from trees were falling like snow all around us, as the terrible shrapnel and firepower ripped through the jungle around us. I was terrified. So they're pinned down, and he actually ends up going to try and help one of the other guys first, a guy named Bell. And he gets to Bell under covering fire, and he says, "Bell was able to help me but couldn't see anything. He limped and crawled. I pushed and swore as we continuously fell in our flight back up the hill. As I pulled him up the hill, one of my feet was shot up from underneath me. I'd been shot in the heel, one of the bullets knocking off a piece of my boot heel. And the force had knocked me down. I got up again and felt a tremendous blow to my hip, knocking me down. Hit again, I thought. Finally, I got Bell behind a rock. Doc was there and started working on him. I lay on my back looking up at the sky through the jungle canopy, not believing I had actually made it down there and back. Yoder was still down there, and although I had witnessed the bullets hitting him, I didn't want to leave. I had to be absolutely sure he was dead. I would never forgive myself if I pulled back and he was still alive. I was ready to call artillery in on our position if we were overrun. And that's like the ultimate game over move. We're going to be overrun by the enemy. Okay, here we go. I'm going to call all ordnance on my position. Drop. But luckily, the fire subsides. One of the other platoons had come to their help. And now that other platoon shows up and the enemy's pretty much gone and had stopped shooting. We all stood up. A couple of my men and I ran down to where 3-6's point was standing over Yoder. I leaped over the edge of the gully and stopped at Yoder's body. Kneeling down, I turned his body over. He had died with his head lying downhill. His face was a dark blue from the blood which gravity had pulled into the downhill portion of his body. There wasn't much blood on his body, but numerous bullet holes were cut into his fatigues, covering his stomach and chest. His eyes were closed. I looked at him for a moment, my thoughts running back to our many conversations in the past. Once we had discussed whether we would go to the aid of one of our fellow soldiers if he was in trouble. I had told him I would always respond to one of my men if they needed help. He had replied it would be a lick on me. I wondered if he had known that I tried to get to him. He was the first man under my command to die. I looked up to see some of my platoon and 3-6's platoon standing over a dink body in the gully. 3-6 had an Indian in his platoon, and I had an Indian in my platoon. They drew their knives and slashed the enemy's body in frustration. This was the only dead dink the men could find. One lousy dink for all that pain and suffering. At least we could take our hate out on that son of a bitch. They had also taken one prisoner as well, the other platoon head. And so now he starts thinking. Back to the book. This is it, I thought. I'd been wounded 4 times in battle. I had done my job. Captain Sells had asked after my 3rd wound if I wanted to be sent back. Anyone with 3 wounds was due that. All it took was 2 wounds to get you out of the field. Surely 4 would let me live with myself. What was I trying to prove? But I answered my own question. The men depend on me. It's my job to keep them alive by giving them good leadership and looking after them. They need me. Yeah, but shit. What did I owe myself? I had a wife and 2 little girls who needed me. The $10,000 in insurance money wouldn't do them much good. Where did my duty lie? I was still shaking. I couldn't go through this again. Reluctantly, almost against my will, I started walking toward the captain. Captain? Yes, Fred. You asked once if I wanted to go out of the field, if I'd been wounded a 3rd time? He turned and looked into my face. Yes? Well, would you think I was letting you and my men down if I did? I stammered. No, I wouldn't. You've done your job. I could get you a job, get you a good job with S2. That's intelligence back in the rear. I think I want out. I don't know if I can do this again. Maybe I can't cut it. That's nonsense. You're a hell of a fine officer, and the men will understand, but you think about it. Okay, I will. Let me think. A little bit of confidence returned at his words. I handed Yoder's things to him. I wandered back to the packs, thinking I should find Yoder's pack. Bell had stood up and was coming toward me when he saw the blindfolded dink. In one motion, he swung his fist into the dink's face. He hit him again and again, knocking the surprised dink down in a burst of fury. Bell started kicking him. It was obvious Bell was going to kill him. The other men and I stood smoking and watching. We were going to let Bell kill the dink. Bell had the right. Captain Sells yelled and ran over to us, pushing me out of the way and pulling Bell off the dink. Here! What's this? What's going on? We are not going to have this in my company. This man's a prisoner. Lieutenant Downs, what are you doing just standing there? I looked at him in surprise. Bell was killing this motherfucker. What's wrong with that? I retorted. You know goddamn well what's the matter with that, Lieutenant. This man is defenseless and our prisoner. Now let's get this prisoner back to the LZ. I wanted the dink dead, but the captain was right. So you can see there, obviously Captain Sells has a great head on his shoulders. And there's something else at play. The other thing that's at play is that by function of the way the battle went down, and by function of being one rank above the platoon commanders that are in the firefights, guess what he is de facto? He's detached. He's detached. Bell's the guy was pinned down, almost got killed, right? He's the guy that's emotional. And guess who pulled him out, risked his life, lost Yoder? That was Downs. So these guys are emotional. They want to kill this guy. They captured him. He's VC. Let's kill him. And Captain Sells is detached because he wasn't in that firefight. He wasn't directly there. So he's able to maintain enough mental detachment to make a hard decision, but also hold the line. Mm-hmm. And this is something that, when we go through the My Lai massacre, this could have happened over and over again. This could have happened anywhere along the way. Someone could have said, hey, what are you doing right there? Stop. We don't do that. And that's exactly what Sells does. And I think another thing that's important from a leadership perspective. Also, before I go to that point, you notice that when he's having the personal conversation with Lieutenant Downs, he calls him Fred. Mm. But when he's screwing up and he needs to kind of put him in his place, he's Lieutenant Downs. Mm. On top of that, from the leadership perspective, from Captain Sells' perspective, he's got to always remember that what is happening, that they are emotional, that they did just lose their buddy. He can't just, be so on the straight and narrow that goes, oh, I'm going to court-martial you. He could court martial Bell, right? Hey, you abused a prisoner. I'm going to court martial you. And he doesn't do that because he understands their perspective. And that's why, again, throughout this book, Sells really impresses me as a very squared away, good, solid leader. As does Downs. I mean, Downs, obviously right here, he's emotional and he's lost it. He's crossed the line, right? But all it takes is Sells just telling him, get back over here, buddy. Yeah. You cross the line, come back, and he says, the captain was right. Yeah. So that's all it took. Just a little snap, just to get him to detach a little bit from the emotions and move away from the darkness. Back to the book. I walked over to the bodies. Yoder's eyes were partially shut, and I leaned down to push them close. Not that it did any good, but for some reason, I thought it was better that way. I stood there with one hand on my aching hip, smoking and thinking. Yoder's face was all muddy from the numerous times he'd been dropped in the mud, and there was a trickle of blood at the base of his throat. This is the way it will always end, I thought. Men being killed in the jungle, other men dragging their bodies out, putting them on choppers, and the rest of us going back to the fighting. When they left on the chopper, it was as if they had never been. Man's beginning and man's end would always be attended by only a few. Those that bore him at birth and those that bore him at death. The only important thing was what he did in between. Good or bad or indifferent, he would touch those around him in some way and then be gone. I wondered if a salute would be in order, not necessarily in the military sense, but a salute from one who had known him and who would never forget him. I decided it was, and I raised my hand to my forehead in a farewell. Now the bird's coming in to pick him up as after he gives that final salute to Yoder. Smoke was popped, and the large chopper swung in towards us for his landing. The doors were pushed back, and I saw the door gunner on the side facing me, looking around, anxiously searching for the omnipresent enemy. Good man, I thought, not trusting a goddamn thing, even with an American infantry company surrounding the LZ. And I just love that. He's noticing that this door gunner's coming in, the helo's coming in to pick him up, and instead of this guy cutting corners and be like, oh, there's an infantry trumping again, there's no rounds being fired, I'm just going to relax. No, this guy's in the game, opens the door, doesn't, what does he say? He says, not trusting a goddamn thing, even with an American infantry company on the LZ. Many thoughts were crisscrossing my mind. Above everything else ran the thought that I could not abandon my men. I felt the shame that I had asked Captain Sells to pull me out of the field earlier when I was still shaken. What would the men think if they found out I was doing such a thing? Worse, what would I think of myself? Now they continue to do operations, and eventually they get pulled out of the field on this for the final time on a helicopter. Back to the book. The machine carried us away. I looked over my men sprawled along the sides of the chopper. They had removed the magazines from their weapons before boarding and now were holding them close to their bodies. The men were dirty and unshaven, their clothes in various stages of disrepair, jungle boots worn and torn with clods of mud between the cleats. There were dark rings under their eyes, and their faces were drawn and tired. Some of those faces were new men sent out to replace the faces that started the operation and were erased. We had experienced the worst of life and the most challenging. We had survived. The platoon I took back was not the platoon I had brought out. Now, they're on yet another operation. If they go back, they get reset, and they're out on another operation, doing a patrol, and I'm going back to the book. About 5 meters past the gate, the two men turned to me and waved me forward. All clear, sir. Let's go, Rudo. I passed through the gate. My right hand grasped my M16. My left held my cigarette. I was humming the Blue Tail Fly as I mentally ticked off the positions around the saddle where I would set my men. I noticed the time. 07:45 hours. My foot slipped backwards a fraction of an inch, hitting the trigger mechanism of a mine. I never heard the explosion. Black powder and dirt flew by me. My eardrums ripped. My body was flying through the air. I threw my arms in front of me in a reflex motion to balance myself. My eyes registered the horror of a brilliantly white, jagged bone sticking out of the stump of arm above where my left elbow had been. Ragged, bloody flesh surrounded the splintered bone. My mind cursed as utter helplessness and despair overwhelmed me. Another part of my body coolly calculated what had caused the explosion. It had been a landmine. But what kind would blow off my arm instead of my legs? Of course, it had to be a bouncing Betty, a mine that flies out of the ground after being tripped and explodes waist high. That would do it. My M16 had been in my right hand. The rifle was shattered. My hand was mangled. I stared in horror at what remained of my right arm. The flesh had been ripped away, exposing 2 bones in my white forearm from wrist to the elbow. The bones looked like 2 white, glistening, narrow rods buried in raw, bloody meat. Thinking, my God, my God, my God, I felt told defeat of my life as I landed on my feet 5 yards from where the mine had exploded. After landing, I staggered forward 2 or 3 steps and then collapsed. My legs wouldn't work. The mine had gone off about 6 inches from my left hip. From the waist down, my body was mutilated and torn, where large chunks of flesh, muscles, blood vessels, and nerves had been ripped away by the hot exploding shrapnel. My buttocks were blown away. The back of my legs were ripped to the bone down to my heels. I rolled over on my back, being careful to keep my stump and right arm out of the dirt and sand. My body was sending so many pain signals to my brain that it overloaded like an electrical circuit. It caused me to feel a racing, humming numbness. I lifted my head to view a scene from hell. I watched a couple of men run by me to the wounded point man. They would only glance at me sideways as I lay there holding my bloody stump in the air. They seemed nervous. Some of my men ran toward me, then turned suddenly away at the sight of my torn body. They stood near me but hesitated to come too close, as if their movement through the air would make it worse. Spag asked me to turn sideways a little bit so he could pull my gear off. There were tears in his eyes as he worked over me. With a grunt, he pulled the belt out from under me. "Is there anything I can do for you?" Spag asked. "Yes, run over there and pick up my arm and bring it back to me. I don't want to leave it in this stinking village." I told Marley to get my squad leaders. "Go take care of the other men, Doc. They need you." I looked up. Marley and my squad leaders were standing in a rough line along my right side. I asked who was hurt. I was feeling weaker and weaker. It was so goddamn cold. As my body fought for life, my thoughts ran to my men and my platoon. I felt I was cheating them by leaving them when they needed me most. When I had joined the platoon as their leader, they had taught me the ways to survive in combat. A second lieutenant who was new in country, and they were old-timers, 18, 19, 20, but old to the ways of combat and death. As I gained experience and confidence as a leader, I became an old-timer, having to make decisions that put me in the position I was in now, wounded and maimed, facing death. My men were still up there, looking at me, despair on their faces. Their invulnerable leader had been brought down. "Marley?" "Yes, sir. I want your men to get the dink who planted that mine. I want him dead. Get him." "We will, 1-6. Don't you worry about that." They looked at each other, then back at me. The gray haze of the day was strong. I pushed it back to look beyond my men. It was colder now and harder to see. I was thinking of my grandma Downs and her farm, of the woods and fields of Indiana I loved so much. If only I could walk them one more time. I'm only 23 years old and I'm dying. What a waste. There are so many things I had meant to do and say, but I hadn't. Now I will never get the chance. So, obviously, although he thought he was going to die, he lived. He lost his arm. He ended up with severe wounds, got discharged from the Army, And, that's one of the things in the story. He had actually gotten picked up for a pilot program. So he was going to be a pilot in the Army. He was going to stay in the Army, become a pilot. And obviously that was gone because he didn't have an arm anymore. Luckily, they were able to save his other arm. But, severe wounds, real long rehab. And eventually he ends up going back to college. And here we go, back to the book. In the fall of 1968, as I stopped at a traffic light on my walk to class across the campus of the University of Denver, a man stepped up to me and said, "Hi." Without waiting for my reply to his greeting, he pointed to the hook sticking out of my left sleeve. "Get that in Vietnam?" I said, "Yeah, up near Tam Kai in 1 Corps. Serves you right." As the man walked away, I stood rooted, too confused with hurt, shame, and anger to react. 10 years have passed. The hurt, shame, and anger still flood over me with the memory. But one thing I am certain. None of the men I knew who served in Vietnam deserved to die or to be maimed, either physically or mentally. I think it is necessary now to give another view of Vietnam. That of the day-to-day life of an infantryman on the ground. I have always been asked what I thought about Vietnam, but never what it was like to fight in Vietnam. This is the way it was for us, the platoon of Delta 16. And in the afterword, he talks about why he wrote this book. In writing The Killing Zone, I had 2 goals. I wanted future young infantry lieutenants and non-commissioned officers to learn from my experiences, both good and bad. Some actions I took as a combat officer had worked out well, and some had not. The time had come to deal with both. Perhaps some would learn from my mistakes, especially the lesson that combat does not go by the book. I also wanted to show future generations that the American soldier in Vietnam was a good soldier. In 1978, the anti-war, anti-military feeling in the United States was pervasive in the newspapers, on television, among writers, in movies, and in colleges. I had started college at the University of Denver in the fall of 1968 while I was still on active duty in the military. The Students for a Democratic Society, the Weathermen, and other anti-war groups on campus targeted anyone in the military as fair game for their anti-war stance. Such hostility was not pleasant for me or other Vietnam veterans. It was hard to be denigrated for serving your country. Many veterans never admitted they were in the service for many years after Vietnam. Angry at the anti-war faction, I wanted to set the record straight by proving that the men I served with had fought and died with honor. And here are the men that died and made the ultimate sacrifice for freedom and for their brothers in arms from Delta Company, 1st Battalion of the 14th Infantry, 3rd Brigade, 4th Infantry Division. PFC Donald Lawrence Glover, PFC Norman Charles Kissinger, PFC Robert Wayne Seaton, Spec 4 Gregory Thomas Eiding, Spec 4 Charles Edwin Doc Hoffman, PFC James Garrett Miller, Spec 4 James Strong Yoder, PFC William Henry Harf, Spec 4 Stephen Richard Anderson, Spec 4 Lewis Charles Nelson, Second Lieutenant William Dwight Ordway, PFC Paul James Miller, Spec 4 Jose Cortez, PFC Charles Peter Torliet, and Second Lieutenant John C. Martin. So, Fred Downs, Second Lieutenant, asked us to do two things in this book. First, learn from his experiences, the mistakes, the lessons, and that is what we do here. We read and we study and we think and we learn. And the second thing he asks is that we remember the men who fought and died with honor. And that's something that we need to do, and we should continue to do each and every day. Remember. And that is one thing about this podcast that has a lot of meaning to me, is the fact that people are listening to it, and the memory of these types of men and the challenges that they faced, it will be remembered. They will be remembered. Always. So, once again, the book is called The Killing Zone, My Life in the Vietnam War by Frederick Downs. It's a fantastic read. It's a fantastic book. It's a fantastic dedication, and it does an incredible job of honoring these men that fought so hard in a very unpopular war. And buy the book and read it. You will absolutely get a lot out of it. Echo Charles. I believe we can move on to the next sector of this podcast. And again, if nothing else is delivered through this podcast, let's let it be these couple things, these couple ideas of learning lessons from other people's experiences and remembering other people's sacrifices. That's definitely one of the driving forces behind my will to do this podcast. And we're going to keep doing the podcast. Echo, get me out of here, please. Get me out of this situation. I'm in that zone right now. I need to send up a red star cluster. You know what that is? So in the military, when you need help, it's a red star cluster. It's a flare. You pop up and it's big. Flare. It means you couldn't communicate with anybody and you need some help. Gotcha. So there's my red star cluster. You need to jump in and say, "Hey, Jocko, speaking of the podcast, here's how we can support it." Yep. So talk about that while I get over here and get myself under control before I start smashing things.
Yeah, if you want to send in reinforcements to support Jocko and our podcast here, while supporting yourself with supplementation, by the way, it's a good idea. Go to onnit.com/Jocko. So Onnit has like these supplements that we take. Supplements for your joints, krill oil, boom. Shroom Tech for performance, hard stuff, CrossFit, Jiu Jitsu. Mm-hmm. If you're trying to go hard,
hardcore
in the paint, Shroom Tech, boom. Also, if you do your shopping at Amazon, which I think we all do, go ahead and click through our website. We have a little link there, and you can support it that way. That's a super easy way. All you got to do is remember to do it before you shop.
That is helpful.
Yeah, very much so. We also have a new tool.
Because can you make the remembering part a little bit easier?
Yes. So when you figure, hey, I gotta remember to go to the website before I shop on Amazon. Sometimes I'm in a hurry, whatever. Maybe I'm thinking about other stuff. I'm not thinking about Jocko's podcast every single day, all day. I gotta buy some cleaner, some duct tape, whatever. Here's a way so it helps you remember and or makes you not have to remember. Anyways, this little tool called the Trooper Tool.
Oh,
Jocko Podcast Trooper Tool. Thanks to Brady for that one.
Brady, props.
So it's a cool little thing. It's like this just small little thing. It's pretty cool. You click on there's a little link on both the websites. So you click on the thing. It asks you if you want it. You click yes. Puts a little icon there on your browser, and it basically directs you to the affiliate Amazon link automatically. So you don't got to think. Yeah, it's dope. And
that's a really easy way to support the podcast.
Yeah.
And the it doesn't cost you anything.
Yeah.
It costs Amazon something. It seems to me like Amazon can afford to kick a little bit to the podcast over here, right?
Yeah, and
Just
really,
a little bit.
it does serve its purpose because Amazon, like Amazon, they're a good company, provides good stuff, good service, and all that, and they're trying to get the word out. Mm-hmm. And they partner with people who can get the word out.
Yeah, and there's people that are going to go, oh, you know what? I want to support the podcast, so I will buy this instead of buying it through some other website. They're going to go to the store that's going to support something that they enjoy or something that they get value out of, hopefully, from this podcast. So, yeah, that's an awesome way to support. We appreciate it.
And it makes it like, it's kind of, this little tool is kind of cool because it kind of makes it official. Like if you're one of the people that listen to this and really talk with us and stuff, it is a cool way to kind of be more part of the group, I guess. I don't know. It seems like it. When I put mine up there, I'm like, hey, I'm like a fish. I don't know. It felt like
we're
that
in the game.
I don't know. Yeah.
Echo Charles is in the game, and we dig that.
So it was cool. Yeah, it's a really cool tool. You don't have to. It's safe. It's not like this. You just put it on. If you don't want it on there anymore for whatever reason,
right click it.
Right click and it.
Because you made a little video that shows. You go to the Jocko Podcast YouTube channel. And Echo Charles made a very high-speed instructional video on how to do this.
I wasn't trying to waste anybody's time. It's really easy.
You are not playing around with the instructional video. I think that was very impressive.
Yep.
And by the way, subscribe. Do me a favor, troopers. Subscribe to the YouTube channel, the Jocko Podcast YouTube channel. That way, when Echo, because I've been hacking on Echo to make little outtakes and other little conversations and videos. And he's like, well, we got some subscribers, but maybe, if we had some more, maybe I'd be more. So we need to motivate Echo Charles just a little bit so we could get some outtake videos, some other interesting videos. I wanted to do a little pre-video today of what it was like when we were getting set up because we have a little ritual that we go through when we're making some beverages, some Alpha Brainy. And we have, so I was like, it'd be pretty cool if you shot a little video. And he's like, well, maybe
Are
one
you trying
day.
to imitate me right now?
No, I actually am imitating you. So subscribe to I don't think it doesn't. I mean, just go to the Jocko Podcast channel on YouTube. Subscribe.
Yeah. I think it's youtube.com/Jocko Podcast.
And also, what's cool about that is when you do that, then you get little emails that say, not like you just get an email that says, hey, Jocko Podcast just uploaded a new video. I get those, and I'm always like, oh, yeah, cool. Now I can watch the video.
And even that's optional.
Oh, okay.
You can opt out if you want.
Opt out.
But yeah, that's a good. And I have remember that one children's book idea I had. Yeah, you probably forget because.
No, you need to remind me. I got a lot of ideas.
Anyway, I have that on video when we're talking. Anyway.
Oh yeah, that'd be funny. Yeah. So
I'm gonna post
some things you got to understand. So I have a certain stand. I'm not talking to you, Echo. I'm talking to people that are listening right now. I mean, you're here too, so I guess I'm talking to you too. But people got to understand that there's a certain expectation in my mind of what the podcast is and what it's supposed to be. Sure. So when something happens that's not quite there, I'm like, you know what? I don't want to talk about that on the podcast. But this, like, for instance, before we hit record, we're recording, but before I open the show, we're talking about something, right? We're always talking about something. And sometimes those conversations are 20 minutes, half an hour. We're talking about real stuff. We're talking about legit things. But we haven't even introduced the podcast yet, so that goes in the scrap pile.
Right.
Now, some of the scrap pile material, while it might not be in marching step with what the podcast is, it does perhaps have a life that it could live, and it could guide people in a certain way, and it's stuff that people might be interested in. So that could be a YouTube download, do YouTube, just post it on there, so that way people get a little taste of other things around the podcast, which I think people would dig.
Yeah, that makes sense. So like, if you
free your mind, Echo Charles, free your mind.
You're totally right.
Well, thank you. For once.
Yeah, because you know how if you listen to it on iTunes, you're like, why am I going to sit and watch Echo and Jocko talk to each other? I listen to and I got to look at them too. A lot of people might not be interested in that.
There's some moments. Subscribe? You know what I do is I watch certain moments of the podcast on YouTube.
Yeah.
Like when I know I was feeling intense about something, I go and see what that looks like. See, like, okay, what does that look like when I'm feeling that? Does it look like from the outside what it feels like from the inside? Because even today I was getting pretty fired up. Like, I mean, you're talking about heroes and young men, 18, 19, 20 years old that said, okay, this unpopular war, I'll go fight it.
Yeah.
I'll go fight it. I'll go risk my life. I'll go out there in the jungle and live in, I was out this week in the field, right? Camping. I kept putting it in quotes on Twitter. I was putting in quotes because I was like, I can't call this the field. But, it wasn't the comfort of a house, right? It was bugs and ants. And I'm like thinking to myself, this is nothing. And I was thinking back to the Forgotten Highlander. And remember, the bugs were just eating those guys alive. And, you can't compare. So these guys that just stepped up, fought, I just want to always, that kind of thing will get me fired up. So when I go back to the videos, sometimes I go, man, what was I looking like right there? A little self-assessment. Mm-hmm. And I wonder if, because when I'm feeling that way, I'm like, okay, you got to detach a little bit because you're starting to get a little bit fired up. I'm going to start breaking. I'm going to start getting like really emotional about something. And so I got a little red flag goes up. You got to back off a little bit here. Mm-hmm. We don't have to edit the video if I break down. Yep. So I got to just back off. And sometimes I got to see, what does that look like? Does it look, can you tell? Am I looking, so that's the kind of thing that I like to go back and look at the YouTube videos and say, what does this look like?
Yeah. There's some value. And there's a lot of value on YouTube that we're probably not, capitalizing. I don't know, whatever for people who care.
And it's weird too, because the interesting thing about all this is you use the word capitalize, right? And the fact of the matter is we aren't really capitalizing on this at all. And I keep getting told by a variety of different people what to do to right there, to capitalize.
Yeah, I meant to just capitalize, not for us to capitalize. I mean, for everybody, people I know, listen.
But what we want to do is we want to maximize the effort that we put in here. We want to maximize it so that people get the most out of it.
Yeah, that's what.
That's what I know. That's what you meant. I know you didn't mean like let's run to the cash machine, because we're doing it for the passion of doing it. That's what I'm sitting here for. Sitting here so I can tell this story right here about these guys.
Yeah.
And I know I hear from all kinds of cops. I hear from my SEAL buddies that are still in, that are listening to it, that are asking me, texting me questions, going, hey, man, what's going on with this? Hey, what would you have done differently here? Hey, those are my buddies that are getting ready to deploy overseas right now. And I get texts and emails and Twitter things from guys that are active duty in the Marine Corps and the Army. So I know that we're getting the word out there, and that's what I'm sitting here for.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, and you make a good point with, there's a lot of people who don't watch the video. Of course, that totally makes sense.
I mean, I don't watch podcast videos.
Right.
I mean, why? The reason podcasts are so convenient is because you can be doing something else.
Yes.
You don't have to dedicate. You have to dedicate all your senses to it. You only have to dedicate 2 of them: your ears and your brain.
Yeah.
But you don't have to dedicate your eyes. You don't have to dedicate your ass to sit down in a chair and watch something. You can walk around. You can do yard work. You can drive. You can do what you got to do.
Yeah.
But I think the shorter little YouTube clips where you go, hey, check this out. This is when Jocko and I were discussing a kid's book that Echo was talking about. Or
Good idea, by the way.
Yeah.
I'm going to post it.
Yeah, post that thing up.
Yeah. And it's interesting because a lot of people apparently are surprised that I look different than I sound, I guess.
Oh, yeah. They think you're a skinny white hipster.
Or, yeah.
That's what they think you are.
Maybe I am at heart.
Maybe you are at heart. You're just trapped. Maybe you identify as a skinny white hipster, even though you're a 220 something
I don't know.
pound.
No, I don't know. Hey, I don't identify myself by my physical characteristics.
like that.
You know, it's
like
what's in my heart and my mind.
The content of your character.
Yeah, the
as
content of my
as we like
character.
to say.
Yeah, I
Awesome.
think the YouTube idea is a good idea. Yeah, we'll post more. So I have a lot too, man. So many outtakes, a lot.
Oh.
All right,
And you've done some
It's a-
really good outtake videos in the past.
Yeah, they're pretty. Yeah.
From when we were filming commercials and stuff.
Oh,
for
right.
the
Yes,
gym.
yes.
Yeah, those were good.
All right. I'll
anything
do it.
else?
Jocko, you in?
Jocko store? Did you talk about that? Yes. Go to the store, buy some merchandise. Somebody hit me up on Twitter the other day, and they're like, "Hey, you should set up a." We got asked this a bunch of times. Set up a Patreon. Patreon? Is that what it's called?
Patreon.
Patreon,
Yeah, Patreon.
where you can donate to the podcast a certain amount. And I just said, "Hey, man, go buy a T-shirt. You know that supports us just as well.
Yeah.
And you get a T-shirt, and just that's a good way to support the podcast.
Yeah.
Buy some merchandise. Buy some gear."
Right. Yeah, the Jocko store, that's a good one. T-shirts, coffee mugs, stickers. Those are kind of cool. One of my friends saw 2 Jocko stickers in the wild.
In the
In one
wild.
day. Yeah.
Dang.
Or maybe just over the
what
weekend.
location?
Here, San Diego.
Oh, everyone in San Diego, we know everyone in San Diego. Doesn't count.
I don't know.
I
Yeah.
want to see it
I
in
don't know.
Cleveland.
It counts. It counts. But yeah.
Awesome.
That's good. Yep.
So now we get to those questions from the interwebs.
Oops. First question. Jocko, is a minimal amount of competent defensive ability, self-defense, essentially, the most overlooked essential stabilizer of young male psyche?
So this question, this actually came across the interwebs as a statement, an opinion.
Right.
And I kind of rephrased it just a little bit to make it into a question, but it actually came across someone was saying, look, this person believes that knowing how to fight, competent defensive ability, I call that knowing how to fight, and he thinks it's the most essential stabilizer of a young male psyche. I agree with this statement. I think that, I completely agree with it. I think that learning how to fight and knowing how to fight gives you real confidence and security, not just in the form of being secure, but in opposition to insecurity, right? Because when you know how to fight, all of a sudden you don't have anything to prove anymore.
Yeah.
And this changes so many. I wish I would have learned how to fight at a much younger. We fought all the time when I was a kid. Mm-hmm. We didn't know how to fight. So what do we have to do? Prove that we knew how to fight. Yeah. If we actually knew how to fight, we wouldn't have had to prove that all the time. So I absolutely agree with this. And that's why I'm constantly trying to get people to get into jiu-jitsu. Get your kids into jiu-jitsu. Get your 13-year-old boy, your 10-year-old boy, get him into jiu-jitsu. Your girl too. Because your girl's going to use it for defense. Mm-hmm. Girls don't have the constant tension of fighting that guys have. Mm-hmm. It is part of who we are. When I shake someone's hand, I don't care what kind of mood I'm in, I am thinking about taking them down. I am thinking about what I'm going to do to them in a fight. It doesn't matter if I'm meeting Santa Claus. Mm-hmm. I'm thinking about doing a double leg. I'm thinking about what his weight is. Does he have cauliflower ear? That's what I'm doing. Mm-hmm. And guys do that. And it's real. And I mean, especially in the environment I grew up in, the SEAL teams, I mean, everybody's got that constant test between
the evaluation.
It's the evaluation.
Yep.
So if you don't know how to fight, there's only one way to figure out where you are, and that is to fight. And so you end up doing stupid things to prove your manhood. And I hate to use that word, but you end up doing stupid things to prove your manhood. So my recommendation is, I totally agree with this statement. I think it is a huge stabilizer of your personality and and your psyche as a man. So get those kids to learn jiu-jitsu. They're going to understand. The other thing is you understand violence. You respect it because you know you got choked out. You know it's happened. You know that is a horrible feeling. Yep. It's a horrible feeling when another human being can control you 100%. You know what? Physically, it doesn't matter how smart you are anymore. I'm sorry, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter how smart you are anymore. When you are getting completely physically dominated by someone, it doesn't matter that you're smarter than them. At that time, there's nothing you can do about it. What are you going to challenge them to a spelling bee? It's not going to help you. You're under their control, and that's a horrible, horrible feeling.
Yeah.
And so I think it's, and I felt that, when I was a kid, I got bullied just like everybody. Everybody gets bullied at a certain point. You show up to high school, you're 13 years old. I was a young, however that works when you are born. I was born in September. So I was a young, scrawny kid, and I didn't get bullied to some crazy extent, but you get picked on. You get picked on, you get into little scuffles, and you get thrown around by a kid that reached puberty when he was 9, and he's now, 6 feet, 220, and I'm showing up at school 13 years old, weighing $145. You're gonna get physically controlled, and it's not fun. And so I didn't know how to fight. I was trying to figure it out. And there was no one knew how to fight back then, unless you were a boxer, maybe a wrestler. But yeah, so definitely this is a huge piece. Helps you with, I think kids that know how to fight are going to get in a lot less street fights. They're going to do a lot less stupid things to prove themselves because guess what? They already have the essential, primal, animalistic characteristic of physical domination, and that goes a long way.
Yeah, and we talked about this before, back to the girls thing, getting your girls into it. You know how when you get into any kind of physical situation, even if you're in a crowd and someone starts shoving someone else, not even you, and boom, you feel the force of somebody, or someone's just all like on you, or even if someone tackles you or something like that, it's like this kind of imposed physical situation. And when you're into jiu-jitsu, that's every day. So you get used to that real quick, and in fact, you get real comfortable with it. But as a girl, you're not trying to win fights now. I know jiu-jitsu, I'm going to try to win fights and beat up guys. That's not really what it's for girls. It's more for knowing how to function, knowing where to be, where not to be. Because, man, if you don't know, you just simply don't know.
And also being totally right. And then also being inoculated to the physical contact when it happens.
So it won't.
And I'll tell you, say you can't win. I mean, not looking to win fights. Go watch YouTube.
Yeah.
There's all kinds of videos of girls just working over guys. And I mean in street fights.
Yeah.
There's one in particular where this girl's just triangle, arm lock, just choke, just crushing this kid.
Yeah. Well, the truth is, if you learn jiu-jitsu, if someone knows jiu-jitsu, someone doesn't, the chance of the person knowing jiu-jitsu winning the fight is very, very, very high.
Yes.
Even if you're a girl, it still applies to you. Yep. Of course, the girl's at a physical disadvantage because she's smaller, weaker, whatever. But like I said, jiu-jitsu is just this huge jump in, ability as far as fights go.
And something else, from a pure self-defense perspective, a lot of times, let's say a girl's not able to physically, let's say she's 100 pounds and a guy attacks her that's 200 pounds. She might not be able to put him to sleep. She might not be able to finish him, but she may be able to survive, fend the guy off for a minute and 30 seconds instead of 2 seconds, instead of 4 seconds, instead of 8 seconds. So that's what it takes for someone to hear, for someone to see. So every second counts. And if you know jiu-jitsu, I guarantee you, it's really hard to subdue somebody that knows some jiu-jitsu if you don't know anything. You are going to have a hard time getting control of them. They're going to be, and even if you're stronger than them, you'll be able to get a hold of them maybe eventually if they're a lot smaller and a lot weaker than you, but it's going to be a fight. And a lot of, you read a lot of stories when in self-defense situations, if the girl puts up a decent fight, the guy's not going to have any of it. He's going to realize that he's not looking for that. He's not looking for a fight. He's looking for something else. And so the fight begins. He backs off. So yeah, absolutely. It applies for girls as well. And there's just a certain level of confidence, and I've seen that, my son's had a couple little scuffles, a couple that I've witnessed too, where, he just was not trying to have a problem. until someone just grabs him and is obviously going to try and do something to him, and then that person's getting launched. Like, hey, perfect judo, because you're going to get. How hard is it to judo throw somebody that doesn't know any judo jiu-jitsu? It's so easy. So you see a kid fly through the air, hit the ground. You see my son, just like there's no guard passing because the person doesn't even know what the guard is.
There is no
so
guard
it's just
to
straight
pass.
to mount.
Yeah.
And then once you're in mount, the person has no idea what's happening, and they're completely controlled and they're getting put to sleep. That's it. It's as easy as that.
Yeah, and it's so funny how this is kind of the part that I forget actually every once in a while, how you brought up when you shake someone's hand, you're always thinking about it or whatever. So that's the thing too. That's why it's almost like if you don't know jiu-jitsu, like or for real fighting, there's not many out there, man. There's not many. But we'll just say if you don't know jiu-jitsu, you might fall into this trap by thinking, well, I might, you never know. He's not on all the time, or he might not be ready for this, or, I'll surprise him with this punch or something like this. And they won't give it its due credit.
Nope.
But the thing is, when you learn jiu-jitsu, bro, that's all you're thinking about. You're like, oh, fuck, I take this guy right here. 100% of the time. You can be laying in your bed with your wife, and she'll be like, hey, give me a hug. And you're like, let me get that underhook there. Yes, exactly. The whole time. So you can't really... To surprise a guy who knows jiu-jitsu, to surprise him is super hard. Like, you got to do from behind. I don't know. Even if you sneak up from behind, like, you know what to do from behind. You got to, like, I don't know, hit him or something really hard, knock him out one punch from behind or something like that.
And it's really hard to knock somebody out with one punch from behind. So
yeah, but that's so funny because that is how it is. Even as, like, a high-level guy, you're still, like, it's always on your mind. Like, always. It's like you're walking around with this big, powerful, like, gun or something. Like, you're like, okay, who wants to get shot? Not that you want to shoot people specifically, but it's like this radar that's like, okay, who wants to get shot kind of thing. Because you're just ready. It's ready. You're just ready to do it the whole time.
Yeah, and to me, honestly, it's so instinctive at this point.
Yeah,
it's just part of every movement that you make is... thinking about that. And you ever had somebody that doesn't know jiu-jitsu, like maybe you haven't seen someone in a while? I've had that happen where I've seen someone for a while.
Yes. All the time.
And I mean 20 years. So they have no idea what jiu-jitsu is. We've gone completely different paths in our lives, and they like grab hold of you as if it was the old days and you were going to have a tussle.
Yeah.
And it's just a 4-second, spirit crushing maneuver of death.
Yeah. And you're happy to do it too, because as an adult, like, I think anywhere past 26, 27 years old, it's hard to get away with like getting into a wrestling match in public or, somewhere outside of the match.
That's interesting.
You might not have known that. But I don't know. I think I speak for more people than just myself, but there's a part of your mind that kind of hopes it happens just with your friend, or something like that. Just so you can do it. It's like always on your mind.
Always hoping for a scrap.
You know what? Ironically, back to the part where I was saying it's kind of hard to surprise a jiu-jitsu guy. Ironically, the easiest time to surprise a jiu-jitsu guy is on the mat if you're another jiu-jitsu guy. What you do is you play like, oh, we're just going light right now. And then you go hard, So you can't really surprise them in public. You gotta learn jiu-jitsu, go on the mat, roll with them, make them think you're not rolling hard, then surprise them.
And I think that's part of it is you become more aware when you're just talking. What you've been talking about the past couple minutes is awareness. Yeah. And when you have jiu-jitsu in your brain, then, and it's true with boxing too and Muay Thai, when you have that stuff in your brain, then you can't help but be aware of what's happening around you because it's in there. Yeah. It's like knowing that the color of the table is brown. Like you know what that person's body position is. You're looking and seeing that their stance is off balance. You're seeing an underhook exposed. So you can't take it away. So your awareness increases. You also are aware of what problems can occur really quickly. So if you start, if you're a girl and you say, oh, wait a second, now I'm back into a corner where I can't get out. I don't like this feeling. Yeah. It increases your awareness as a human. It makes you more aware of your surroundings. So there's so many benefits. Yeah. It's kind of ridiculous.
Yeah. And you kind of have almost like one level up from that awareness that you're talking about, because like how you're saying, it's part of that, even if you don't know how to fight, it's still kind of on your mind. Like all guys have that kind of sort of evaluation, especially if the guy's close to your close to you,
Yep.
who you are.
Yep.
You know, whether it be age, size, whatever the scenario even. Like if you're a scholar and no one else is a scholar, then another scholar walks in, ooh, this evaluation, you know. So that's how it is naturally.
See how smart this guy is.
Yeah. So as a guy, just naturally you're gonna have even more. It's like you know what the color of brown is or whatever, but just instinctually you're always looking for brown. That's kind of what it's like. So now when you're doing these evaluations that are gonna happen anyway, your jiu-jitsu mind is right there at the front, ready the whole time. Yeah,
Indeed.
Interesting.
Train
Yeah.
jiu-jitsu people.
But that's not to be confused with like you're aggressive and want to fight. That's the weird thing. It's like you don't want to actually fight with people because you don't feel the need to like, oh, I don't know.
Yeah,
prove
you don't
to
have
this
anything to
guy,
prove
or
anything.
yeah.
That's where this whole conversation started off. And also, now you not feel like you need to prove anything, but I literally am like, oh, do I really want to get in a fight with this guy? I'm going to get my knuckles,
Right.
I'm probably going to rip my t-shirt. This guy's going to
Yeah,
grab.
yeah.
Is this really? No. I fight every single day. I don't care about this guy. This is a 2-second thing where I got to scuff up my knee on the pavement, and he's probably going to rip my shirt, and that's going to be a pain. And then I got to deal with the cops if they show up. It's just a big pain.
Yeah.
Whereas if you don't fight and you have that opportunity, maybe you got that thing inside you. No.
Right. The payoff of the fight, right? If you don't know, or if you're just insecure or whatever, the payoff of the fight and hopefully winning is bigger than all the detriments that you got to face.
I used to tell my platoon guys when we were overseas before the war started. And, so guys are overseas, what are you doing? You're drinking, you're out in bars, you're causing problems or whatever. And before you go out, I'd be like, hey guys, if you feel like fighting tonight, come find me. Because if you want to fight, come find me and it'll all be good,
Right.
We'll fight and it's all good. You won't get in trouble. You won't get arrested. You won't get hurt. It's all good.
Oh, you'll get in trouble. You get in trouble for sure.
You're not going to get in trouble with the law, though. You know what I mean? You're not going to get in that kind of trouble. You're going to get a little trouble
buddy.
in your situation and in your positioning is going to be troublesome. So, yeah, it's better to fight amongst yourself than to fight against the outsiders who are going to sue you, pull a knife out and stab you in the throat, whatever, right?
Yeah.
Don't do that. Stay out of the street fights. Not worth it.
Yep.
All right.
I agree with it too, though. When you said you agree that it is the stabilizer.
Indeed.
Overlook. It is. Because if you don't know, you don't even know how much you don't know.
It's funny because we get a lot of people that have started training jiu-jitsu.
Good move.
Yes, but they'll come on Twitter or on the Facebooky and say, hey, I started training jiu-jitsu. Oh my God. I can't believe I need to train this all the time. I can't believe I got control. They always say how humiliating.
Right.
And sometimes they say humbling, but sometimes I think even when they say humbling, they actually mean humiliating. Because that's the weird thing. When you're walking around on the earth without the knowledge, you look at other people and you think, you know what? This guy knows jiu-jitsu. I heard this guy knows jiu-jitsu. It doesn't matter. I'm strong. I'm athletic.
Just hit him in the neck.
I'll just hit him in the neck, or even I'm just strong enough. He's not going to get how's he going to get my arm over there?
Yeah.
It's not going to work. I'll just pull my arm back.
Right.
And then you get on the mat and you go, oh my Lord, I have no control over this situation. This guy is effortlessly making me submit over and over and over again. And that's when the reality hits. The reality doesn't hit on the first time you tap. Because on the first time you tap, you go, oh, I won't do that single movement again. I won't stick my head over there. Okay. So then you get your arm locked.
Yeah.
And then you get your foot locked. And then you get your knee locked. And then you get Kimura. And then you get guillotined again. Then you get rear. So it's just a lose. And then you go, usually for me, it's like 3 to 5 times with somebody that's never trained jiu-jitsu before, 3 to 5 times before they realize like, I will never, because when you tap a guy once that's never trained before and he comes at you so hard, in his mind, he thinks, this time I'm going to get him.
Yep.
And they don't even come close. They don't even realize.
Yep.
So get on the mat, man, and learn the jiu-jitsu.
Yep. Please cover overcoming the frustrations of beginning jiu-jitsu. And this is coming from a 54-year-old, by the way, but not quitting.
Good for him. That's awesome. Glad you're picking up the jiu-jitsu at 54 years old. Okay, so how do the frustrations of beginning jiu-jitsu? And it is absolutely, if you have the wrong mindset, it's viciously frustrating because of everything we just talked about. Yep. You think, I'll just do this and I'll just go a little bit harder and I just won't put my arm there and then I'll be able to win. Right. You're not going to win. You are going to lose. You're going to lose over and over and over again to people that are smaller than you, weaker than you, not as tough as you are. Literally not as tough as you are.
Yep.
Not as tough as you are. You know, jiu-jitsu has a faction of nerds, for lack of a better word, straight nerds. And no offense to the nerds out there, but you know, people that are not physically active, and then for some reason they fall into jiu-jitsu at some point, and they all of a sudden they've got a guy they're not tough, but they'll know the moves and they'll finish you. So those are the people you're going to lose to. So, and it's a long, slow journey that takes a long time. Now, that being said, if you train for a month and someone's trained 0, that journey's not that long and you'll beat that guy.
Yeah.
You will beat that guy. I mean, you know, again, you take 2 people, one of them knows jiu-jitsu for a month and one of them doesn't.
Yep.
That guy's going to win. I mean, you know, basic weight, basic same, you know, you can't have somebody that's completely weak. But in 6 months, you're beating anybody that's untrained. You're beating 95% of, maybe even 99% of the people that are untrained. But as far as like, you think you show up and in 6 months you're going to be beating a blue belt, it's not happening.
Yeah.
It's not happening. Beating a purple belt is not happening. You're not gonna catch a purple belt in your first 2 or 3 years. Unless you got just somebody that doesn't.
Or he lets you. Yeah.
Of course. Like this. Yeah, and like Jeff Glover, he'll let people put him in all kinds. I mean, he does that in competition. You just saw that at Metamoris. He lets all kinds of crazy things happen. So yeah, can that happen? Of course. But as far as legitimately taking someone down, it's not going to happen. So that's what I'm saying is a long, slow journey, especially too because everyone's on that bus. We've talked about this before. Everyone's on the bus getting better. So that blue belt that you started 6 months behind or a year behind, so he's a blue belt, you're a year behind him. He's not stopping getting better. So as you start to pursue his game is evolving and changing and improving. So you're not going to get there. And then on top of that, when you do learn something new, it takes time to incorporate it into your game. So if I taught you, Echo, a new move tonight, I said, hey, here's this cool, here's this new setup for the arm lock, and we drilled it 10 times, and you went now and started to apply that, it would make your game worse because you'd be trying to apply a move that you don't know 100% yet. Like you got some good, solid moves that you do, and those are, you know, those work really well. So when you start incorporating this new move, you don't know it well. You don't get it all together. So you're going to fail at it 100 times. It's not going to work 100 times before you get it. And by the way, every time you tried it on me, I got on top and then I smashed you. And then so you're sacrificing and it's in every time. So you're actually going backwards a little bit before you can go forward. So that's problematic. And that's very, very frustrating. Occasionally you might learn something that like really improves your game dramatically, almost instantly. That happens from time to time. Someone will say, hey, put your arm position here, or hey, you know, whatever the case may be. But generally, when you incorporate something new, it can take some time. You're going to get injuries. You're going to get little injuries. You're going to get big injuries. You're going to be sore. So yes, you will be frustrated. So how do you counter all that? You just got to embrace it. You got to embrace all those things. You got to enjoy all those things. And I hate to be cliche here, but you got to enjoy the journey. You got to enjoy getting tapped out by somebody that's small. Be amazed by that.
Yep.
Say, dang, how did that just happen? That is impressive.
Yep.
Say, hey, got a little war scar on my face. I got, split the eye open. Okay, cool. Chicks dig scars. Just going to go. Don't look at all that stuff as negative. Look at it as, it's like, don't rush to the end. Don't rush to the end. Don't be in a rush to get there. Take your time and enjoy the sights that you're going to go for. Also, I've said this before, select your training partners carefully, especially like you're 54 years old. You don't want to be rolling with a 20-year-old steroid freak that's going white belt trying to kill you. You want to be rolling with a cool, mellow purple belt that's wants to do jiu-jitsu and train. And finally, I would just say, remember that jiu-jitsu should be fun. It should be all those other things, all those frustrating, all those challenges, all those things, all that humiliation and getting humbled, but it should be a good time. You should have fun when you're doing jiu-jitsu. I know I do.
Yeah. Yeah, like a video game, right? You know how
I was out of town for a couple of days, man. And I came back and I had a little injury that I figured out. It took me a little while. I got my jacked up finger. And it took me a little while to get the right apparatus to splint it properly and protect it, but but tonight I trained and I was so happy. I was so happy going, getting on the mat, just saying yes.
Yeah, that is how all the junk parts that come with it were quote unquote junk part. Like the soreness. I got choked out or whatever. That's all part of the game. Seems obvious, right? Yeah, it's all part of the game, but be happy that that's the game you're in. So I mean, jiu-jitsu basic. I mean, if you don't do jiu-jitsu, this will be kind of an insight. Basically, all it is, if you go to a class, you go in, you may or may not warm up, you learn a move, whether it be a submission move or just a move. You learn a move, 2 moves, 3 moves, sometimes 4 moves, and then you cut to
rolling
straight up. You guys are fighting. No strikes. That's it. You're fighting. No strikes. If whatever moves go ahead and do them in real life against this guy.
Real time.
That's it. If you don't know it, if that's your first day and you learn 1, 2, 3 moves that first day, you better try to do those moves. That's it. So of course 2, 3 moves that you learned once, by the way, and you roll with someone who, even if he's still a white belt or whatever, he knows those moves, and then 3, 4 more, and he's practiced them in real time or whatever. Of course he's gonna get you. That's just how it works. But keep in mind, the more you go, the more you do the moves, the more moves you learn, the more you practice them in real life, the better you get at them.
And let's go ahead and just apply this to life as well, because jiu-jitsu is such a great metaphor for life. Whatever you're doing, whatever goal you're trying to achieve, if you're letting those frustrations when you hit those obstacles, if you're letting them control you and get you down, that's the wrong attitude to have.
Yep.
Look at it as a learning opportunity. Look at it as something that's good that's happening. Look at it as a chance for you to try something new. Look at it as the journey that you're trying to achieve. And by the way, anything that's easy to achieve and you don't hit any obstacles, well, that's not worth it, right? That's not going to get the full satisfaction that you want out of that. So in life, as in jiu-jitsu, don't get frustrated. Embrace those challenges, because those are what is making this goal worthwhile.
Yeah, man. And I'm telling you, let's say back to the avoiding frustration specifically. It does, how you were saying, training partners, that does make a big difference, because sometimes, every once in a while, like I've heard of people where their schedule doesn't allow them to catch like the beginner class, for example. So they're like, hey, I have no choice. I got to do this more intermediate or advanced class. So they're the only white belt, and the next guy even closest to him is like an advanced blue belt. So that's going to be a steep learning curve. It's going to be tough, because it's, how are you going to practice your moves in the wild?
You won't get to work your offense.
Yeah, it's really, but here's kind of the good thing. You get to work your defense. So when you do get the opportunity to exercise like your offense, whether you get another class or it just comes but just takes longer or whatever, but you know how good your defense is going to be?
Yeah, and I actually, so from training with Dean for so many years, he's just got some positions that are brutal.
Yes.
Brutal positions. And, for instance, his mount is outstanding. When he gets the mount, when anybody else that I've ever trained with in my life has mounted, with the exception, I guess, of Hicks and Gracie, I felt like, oh, well, it's not Dean. This is not, this isn't a horrible scenario. Yeah. Right. And not that I'm not that worried. I'm not trying to degrade people I've trained with. Right. But that is Dean has an incredible mount. And on top of that, Dean kind of knows my escapes. So whereas if I roll with a random other really good, world-class black belt, they might not know the particulars of my escape. Dean actually does know those.
And he's good at it.
So you're right in that the more you train with people that are better than you, your defense is going to become very good, because like when you mount me, I mean, you got a good solid mount, but I'm like, okay, cool. I'm going to be out of this in a short period of time with no real threats.
Keep telling me that.
And you've had, I mean, I'm sure it's the same way. You've had Dean mounted on you. I mean, my mount, because I don't have a great mount, my mount is nothing compared to Dean's. Yeah. Nothing.
Yeah, fully. Yeah, and that's absolutely true. And at the same time, though, so if you fall in, and I don't want to say it's like a small, because it's a pretty big chance where if you enter a beginner class, there's going to be a guy who's just as much of a beginner as you. Yeah. And that's where you can really flourish, because you can practice moves, your new moves, which, I mean, for lack of a better term, your junk moves on junk people.
I will say this, though. Whoever you roll with, whether they're worse than you, the same as you, or better than you, you're going to get a lot out of it.
Of course.
All three of them. Yes. So you should roll with all three of those types of people. I have a tendency to want to usually roll with guys that are, like, good, and I should spend more. And I do. I mean, I train with everybody that we got at the gym. I'll train with everybody. But I always prefer, of course, I guess I shouldn't say of course, because there are people that are like white belt hunters
Right.
that want to go out there and be bullies. I'm not like that. I'd rather get bullied, right? I want to feel I want to get after it, you know?
Yeah.
But you definitely get benefit from training with people that are better than you, worse than you, and the same as you. Because you practice one of them, you're practicing defense. One of them, you're practicing pure offense. And someone that's equal than you got to start practicing your setups and your approaches. And you got to learn how to defend and do offense and defense at the same time. So it's all good. Roll.
Yeah.
That's basically the concept here. Roll.
Yeah. So
get after it.
Consider that scenario. You roll with, and you're talking from an ideal standpoint, roll with people better than you, same as you, worse than you, or, not as good as you. For a beginner, that's not really the option. The worse than you guys, that's not an option for a beginner. Really.
Yeah.
So
there's no one that's worse than them.
Well, as far as overcoming the frustrations or whatever, it is a good situation where you can get in with guys just as beginner as you. And hope that they hang around, because after a certain amount of time, those guys who aren't as new or who
I could see where it could become frustrating if you were the guy that you were talking about earlier. Let's say a guy you have to work late and you can only go to the advanced class, and all of a sudden you think jiu-jitsu is just getting crushed and destroyed.
And I can't learn this really.
Yeah.
It's like I'm
so
not
I guess
even
the
getting
distance to understand. But yeah, that's a good point. So keep in mind that if you're in that situation, it's okay. You're gonna when you eventually get to roll with people that are more your skill level, you'll be that much better off.
Yeah, for sure. And watch the first time you tap someone out with a move that you learned.
Celebrate that, did you?
Yeah, that's a good time for everyone. Next question, Jocko. How do you balance the idea of checking the ego while in an interview scenario where you need to talk about yourself?
Okay, so good question. I would say in that situation, and that's something that it's not just an interview situation where you're going to need to do that. I mean, you're dealing with your superiors, throughout the course of your career, whatever that may be. You're constantly interacting with people, and you're going to want to make an impression. So I think one of the best ways to do this is, instead of you speaking about why you're so awesome, just state facts of, let's say, accomplishments and let them speak for themselves. In other words, you wouldn't want to say, I am the best project manager in the entire world. Right? That sounds ego-centric. Instead you'd say, I got this, hey, we had a $38 million project, got it done on time, under budget, ahead of schedule, and when I got done with that one, they moved me to another project that was off track, and we got that one back on schedule and back on track as well. So that's the kind of experience that I've had, and I'd love to bring that here to this company, right? So you're not, there's a hint of, hey, this is what I did. I can get some stuff done.
Right. But
you're not saying, listen, I'm better than the people you currently have, so you should hire me because I'm the best, because you don't want to do that. So yeah, just think about it, before you go in, what experience that you have represents the good qualities that you have. So then you can say, if they say, how are you at meeting timelines? You don't say, I am perfect and I'm never late.
I'm dope.
You just say, you say, well, as far as meeting timelines, here's a bunch of projects that I got completed on time. The only one that I missed was one that we had to roll back because of whatever. That way you're actually showing a little bit more humility. You're saying, hey, here's what happened. You're being logical about it. And, speaking of that, I actually got a good question that's similar to this one, about what's the best way to interview people to see if they can be in a leadership position. And this is really hard. Because it's really hard to interviews. And I work with all kinds of different companies, and everybody always says, hey, what's the best way to interview? And man, I interviewed this guy and he seemed so great. Or I interviewed this woman and she seemed incredible and her paper looked great. She looked great on paper and we hired her and she's a disaster, or he's a disaster, or whatever the case may be. Because there's people that are very, good interviewers, right? I mean, there's people that can interview well. They have the gift of gab. They can BS their way through anything and make themselves sound good. So it can be really hard to identify if someone's good, is actually going to be fit for a leadership position or really any position. So one of the things that I always tell people to do is when you go into these, when you want to ask interview questions, ask them scenario-based questions and say, okay, here's what's going on. You got these 3 people in your department, and one of the people has come to you and said that they think there might be something illegal going on with the other 2. What actions do you take? And have a scenario built out that you can actually talk through and see where they go and see what their mindset is and see what they're going to develop as a plan and see how they would execute the plan. So it's a great way of figuring out how people think. Yeah. And then, even that's not a guarantee, because there's people that can navigate those type of answers as well. So, one thing you can do is hire people on a little bit of a trial basis. And that can be difficult in some situations where people are walking away from one job into another job and they're not going to do it on a 90-day trial basis. Right. But when you do have that opportunity, it's a good thing to do as well. But hey, so going back to the first question about keeping your ego in check in an interview, like I said, be confident but not cocky, and let the facts of your experience speak for your abilities rather than beating your own chest.
Yeah, so it's almost like, correct me if I'm wrong here. So you essentially, even if you're talking yourself up, you simply state the facts. That's it. You just state the facts. Don't say your opinion about it.
No,
how you were saying.
Just simply state the facts.
Yeah.
Hey, here's what I did.
Right.
We turned this project around. We got it on track and on budget, and that's the type of experience that I have in those situations.
Right, just like how you're saying, like even if someone had got like an award to be the best whatever
salesman of the year,
salesman of the year, the best whatever of the year, and then like to say that in a factual way would be, I was recognized as the best guy in the world, instead of saying I'm the best guy in the world. Here's my award to prove it, So it's like you're saying the fact that you were recognized, not so much the fact.
That's a very good way of doing it.
Stick to the facts, right? Just the facts.
Just the facts.
Good. Yeah, sure. Next question. How do you stay humble when you know you have better skill sets than others? You seem humble with all that you've accomplished.
Well,
this is just like in general, just how do I be humble?
Yeah, how do you stay humble when you know you have better skill sets than others? And then he's saying that I seem humble with all that I've accomplished, which is actually, it's funny when I read that, like it's not, I'm sure that for the dude that's asking this question, he's thinking I accomplished all this stuff, and it's not, I don't feel that way. Like, first of all, there's always somebody that's better than you. I guarantee it. There's someone that's done more than you. There's someone that's had better experience. There's someone that's accomplished more. And if you are truly the master of something, whatever one thing you're a true master of, there's going to be people that are a lot better at other things than you. So you might be the master of one particular thing, but you have to respect the fact that people are going to be masters at other things or better than you. I mean, so if you're super strong, that's great. Let's see you run a marathon. If you're super flexible, awesome. How much can you deadlift? If you're smart, that's great. You're smart academically. Let's check out your common sense and see where all that's at. So you're going to be good at one thing, but you're going to have failed in other areas or have weaknesses in other areas. And so you just have to keep that in check. And I'll tell you, like, I recognize why I've been successful. For one thing, been surrounded with great people. For another, been lucky in certain situations that I've been in certain times. And, going back to Jiu Jitsu a little bit, it's a good example because just because I can beat someone in Jiu Jitsu, it doesn't mean that I'm a better person.
Yeah, it does.
It doesn't mean that I'm a better person. What it means, basically, is that I happen to get into this random fringe sport before they did. and I spent more time on the mat than they did. That's what it means. It doesn't make me a better person. And I'll tell you what, it goes with, if you feel like you're smarter than someone, it's probably because you've had the opportunity to study a subject, or you've had a bunch of education on something, or you've dove into some subject, so that might make you seem smarter. Whereas if they applied themselves in that particular area, but guess what? They were applying themselves to something else. So yeah, you got to stay humble with that. And also, when we talked about this, when you know what, I am smarter than this person. Well, guess what? There's still something that they're better at than you. And what is it? You might be smarter than them, but guess what? Maybe it's the guy we talked about earlier, where I'm smart as I can be. Guess what? This person can physically take me down and dominate me, and that's horrible. Or they're better at whatever, better athletically, or some people are really good craftsmen with their hands. I mean, there's so many different things that you can be skilled at. And if you start thinking that yourself, that you're better than other people, you're going to have issues, because in the long run, you want to stay humble, just stay alive, because life will humble you. Life is hard. And if you're pushing hard and you're driving hard and you're trying to achieve a lot, you're not always going to win. I don't care who you are. You're going to get humbled. It's going to be hard. So many people that are successful, they've got some hard luck stories along the way of things that they had to push through and overcome in order to get there. They got humbled. And if you're winning every single time, then your goals aren't high enough. So step those up. So, I appreciate the kind of comment, but man, it's not hard to be humble when, you need to take, like, maybe someone, people always think, oh, he's a Navy SEAL or whatever. There's a lot of SEALs that are more badass than me, that done more deployments, that have gotten after it more than me. And I know that's awesome. I mean, good for them. They got after it. Good. So I don't feel like, I did more than everybody. No, there's no one like that. Yeah. There's no one like that. Even Mikey Thornton, who was SEAL, that won the Medal of Honor, awesome guy. He's a hero. But if he gets interviewed, I've watched a bunch of interviews, heard him talk. He's like, you got the Medal of Honor. He's like, it's not mine. It's my guys. It's the guys I was with. It represents all. So there's a guy. Like, who's going to be, if there's anyone in the world that could not be humble, maybe it's Mikey Thornton. Mm-hmm. But guess what? Mikey Thornton, he's as humble as they come. Because you know what? He also has been humbled by combat, because he realized there's things that he tried to do that he didn't get done. Mm-hmm. There's lives he tried to save that he couldn't save. So there's no doubt, if you're living the right life, you're going to be humbled by it. And there's always going to be somebody that's better than you, that's done better than you. So just stay humble. And by the way, what does being cocky get you anyways? What does that turn you into? I talk about this all the time. What does overconfidence get you? You start cutting corners. You start slack. I mean, it's just ridiculous. Mm-hmm. So you got to stay humble. You got to stay hungry if you want to stay in the game. And believe me, you want to stay in the game. You want to stay in the game.
Do you think that, like, and I can't, I mean, I don't know if maybe this is where the question is coming from, but if, when you're insecure and like, you're just, like, everything's a competition, like, just in life, it's like, it goes beyond just what you're into. It's just like, if someone's better than me, it makes me mad, it makes you uneasy or whatever. It's like this insecurity kind of thing. So when you do, it's like, if you look at everything as just this big life like, I got to beat that guy, I got to be better than them. So when you are better than them, it's like you're still looking at it as this competition, like, like, you're not on my level, so you don't deserve to be treated. It's kind of like, maybe this is a good analogy, maybe not, but like in Jiu Jitsu, where if you roll with a white belt, you don't go hard. You don't get satisfaction or whatever. So in the Jiu Jitsu competition arena, you're not giving them the respect. You're not going all out like you would, you're not respecting his armbar. If you are, you're smashing him, no satisfaction, whatever. It's in that specific competition setting. But if you're just an insecure person where you think that all life is like just one big competition.
Oh, you got to smash that person.
Yeah, and if you're not worthy of my smashing, it's like I don't even treat you like you should be on the mats with me, kind of thing. Not cool. But I mean, do you think that maybe that's where some of that comes from? Like, if you're having trouble, like being humble, it's kind of like I'm better than you in life.
Yeah, it's probably just deriving from, and it's insecurity. But there's also there's a dichotomy there too, because man, I like to win. Like no doubt about it. I like to win. And the dichotomy of it is that I also literally don't care. Like if I get beat, I'm like, okay, well, what can I do to get better? It's not, I don't feel this despair because I lost. Losing actually kind of motivates me more.
Right. Yeah.
As opposed to getting angry. And the worst thing that happens is people decide they're not going to compete, right? They're not going to compete in the game of life because they didn't win or they don't feel like they can win. So they go, you know what? I'm just going to back off. I'm just not going to participate in the game. But get in the game. Yeah. Get in the game.
Yeah.
Theme.
So maybe it comes from not understanding what that means when you win and stuff.
I guess.
You know, like let's say if you, like the fight, like back to the fighting situation where about being a secure part of the male balancing a male psyche. If you know that you've achieved these skills, have these skills to win people, who don't have your skill set, you don't want to fight them. So you're just like whatever. True. But let's say like you have a better skill set, yet you're still blowing your horn about your skill set. You're not humble about it. It's like it comes from maybe, I don't know, some insecurity.
There's no doubt. There can be some insecurity that makes people super competitive beyond healthy competitiveness.
Right, just like in life, like I'm just in life, no matter what.
Which, again, there's people that are that way, myself included. But again, the dichotomy is...
I don't think you're like that.
No, I know I am.
Well, okay.
I know I am.
Remember Echelon Front. Remember the logo.
Yeah.
Right? And I'm going to post this on Twitter, too. Jocko made the original Echelon Front logo. This is like a long time ago.
Yeah.
And you were like, hey, this is the logo, something like this. And then basically, but you didn't care that it was junk.
No, but all I wanted to do is get you the idea.
You weren't competing with me. But you drew and I drew. But like as someone who's competing in everything in life, like if you draw something and I draw something, you're like, I want to make mine better.
Well, see, I wanted to win with the idea, not with the skill. The idea.
To win the war.
I wanted to win the war, not the short-term battles. Like who can draw this thing better. the war was who comes up with the strategic victory, which the icon and the symbol for Echelon Front is the one that I drew.
I liked it.
So yes, I didn't care that it looked like junk because I'm not. Did it. You should post that because it's pretty fun. I did it on PowerPoint with like a crayon. It looks like a crayon because I didn't want to take much time with it. I knew that thing would take you 15 minutes to make on your. What is it? AI Illustrator.
Yeah, man, that was a long time. I don't know. I was like, that might have been. Don't be mad at me. That's probably the first logo I've ever actually made. Maybe. Hey, there you go.
It was very successful.
Yeah. Cool. Thanks for trusting me. Next question. What do you do when you have two extreme ownership believers that have to go against each other?
Ooh. Sounds like a big challenging question. But it actually shouldn't be, because if you think about this, if you truly think about this, this should not be an issue, and here's why. Go against each other? Against each other? So what are the goals? Are these two people on the same team? I'm assuming that they're on the same team, right? They're on the same team. So if they're on the same team and we want to win, we have the same goals, we want to win, but we won't work together? Because if the goal is to win and we both want to win, why would we be going against each other? We are not taking actual extreme ownership. Because if you and I had opposing ideas, but we had the same long-term goal, I'm going to take ownership and say, all right, Echo, we got to come to terms here. We got to work this out. We got to and if you were doing the same thing, you'd be like, yeah, absolutely. Let's sit down. Let's figure this out. Let's figure out which one would be the best. Let's take it to market. Let's do a market test. We're going to figure out a real solution because we're taking ownership of it. So what's the little nugget that's getting into the system here and screwing things up? It's ego, 100%. And I will say this, occasionally the idea of extreme ownership can be very poorly and very incorrectly interpreted as micromanagement and egomania. Meaning like, I'm going to own this. I own this. This is mine, right? That's not what extreme ownership is at all. It's, you got to own everything, but you don't feel the intrinsic need to do everything, right? Because it's like owning the outcome.
Right.
And owning the progress and owning the steps along the way and owning the responsibility of mission achievement. It doesn't mean that you own each individual step and you have to make it your way. That's not extreme ownership. That's micromanagement. So extreme ownership is about leadership and decentralized command and using indirect tactics to make things happen and owning the outcome. So that's why if you have two people that were truly about like, hey, I'm going to own this. I'm going to have the attitude of extreme ownership. If you and I have the attitude of extreme ownership, we're not going to fight over anything because we have the same long-term goal. And if you come up with a better idea of how to get there, I'm going to say, oh, Echo, awesome job. That's a great way. We're going to get to where we want to go. We own that outcome. We're going to make it happen. Boom, I'm going to support you. The only time it's going to be a problem is if I have an ego and then you have an ego. When we both have an ego issue. And usually one person with a big ego, that inflames other people's egos. Because if I say, hey, Echo, I got a great plan for how to do this. We need to execute it my way. There's a little bit of ego coming out. Because now your ego was down, but all of a sudden you're like, what do you mean your way?
Right.
Wait a second. Just right there, now we got to think.
Right.
Now we got some kind of issue going. Yeah. We're working against each other instead of working together. So that is absolutely problematic. And I guess to put this in a nutshell, if you're using the principle of extreme ownership, the most important thing you need to take extreme ownership of is your own ego and put that thing in check.
Yeah, it seems like the extreme ownership, as far as owning it, is essentially take responsibility, like at all costs kind of thing, for more like the bad stuff that happens.
Oh,
right?
Absolutely, the bad stuff. Absolutely, the bad stuff. But but you're going to because absolutely, if you and I do something great together and I was the leader, I don't go, yes, that's right. You say, hey, first of all, this was mostly on Echo. He did most of the work. He did all the, that's what I'm going to say. I'm not going to say, no, this was mine. Yeah. But when something goes wrong, obviously, I don't say, no, it's Echo's fault. No, I say, hey, this was my fault. Just, I should have done a double check on the audio before we started the podcast because, we wanted to make sure that thing was recording. Right? Yeah, I don't say, no, Echo dropped the ball.
Yeah.
No, I don't do that.
It's not him.
I say, hey, you should have double checked. So that's, if you truly have two people that have real ownership and they put their egos in check, this is literally not an issue.
Right. So this isn't even a question for that, right? Because they don't go against each other. Yep. They're going with each other.
And so what are the chances that you, as a person that's really put your ego in check and you're exercising extreme ownership, what are the chances that you work with another person that is exactly with the same mindset, taking ownership, but no ego? What are the chances of that? They're actually pretty slim. This is not easy to do. It's simple, not easy, right? So that means you have to be even more proactive in helping adapt to their ego scenario that's happening. And when Echo says, hey, we need to do this my way, I'll be like, hey, you know what, Echo? Let's take a look at it. Absolutely. You've always come up with great plans. Let's take a look at what this one is here. And all of a sudden, I've disarmed you a little bit. You're feeling good about it. You're like, oh, yeah, that's right. Jocko's going to listen to me because that's great. That's exactly what I want you to think. It's exactly what I want you to think. So you're going to have work to do. You're going to have work to do. That's what it is. It's a challenge. It's work. But when you have the basic principles, I shouldn't say basic, when you have the fundamental principles, they are going to work well for you. And when they're not working well for you, don't get mad at the other person and blame their ego. Look at your own ego, because you can adjust and adapt and maneuver and get that person disarmed, and you can flank them, and then you're going to win.
Wow, that's so interesting that how this question is like that. Like, it seems like when I first read it, I was like, oh, shoot, that's a good question, you know?
Yep.
And it is, but in a different way, because this question is essentially what it does is it, like, what do you call it? Like a strainer or whatever. Like, it strains out the guy who's not doing extreme ownership. See how it says if they're both exercising it? But if they're going against each other, that means there's some extreme ownership not being practiced somewhere in here. We don't know, but we can find out, you know? Who's going against who kind of thing. If they're both going against each other, well, maybe they both have it, you know?
Mm-hmm.
So,
but there's always going to be one person. Well, not always, but there's usually going to be one person that got it, that understands it. Yeah. And that's going to be working. And this guy is just so good and so smooth and so tactical. And they're going to win. And that other person, that's right. You know why we're winning? Because I got extreme ownership going on, and I took ownership of this project. And you know what the guy says? Like the real leader is like, absolutely, man, you did a great job with that. And meanwhile, he knows he just manipulated and flanked him and made it happen to the best for the team.
You know, he's keeping the train going. That's good.
Yeah, indeed.
Interesting. Okay.
I think we got
last question.
Yeah, just maybe one more.
Maybe. Jocko, can you talk about fear of failure and how to overcome it?
Fear of failure. So, obviously, fear of failure can keep you from taking risk. And it can leave you just sitting there paralyzed into not taking any action at all. And obviously, that's bad. But I don't actually want you to overcome the fear of failure. I want you to be afraid of failure. Fear of failure is good. Fear of failure will keep you up at night, planning and rehearsing and going over contingencies. Fear of failure will keep you training hard. It'll stop you from cutting corners. Fear of failure will keep you working and thinking and striving and relentlessly trying to be more prepared for battle. So I want you to be afraid of failing. I fear failure. But more important, I want you to be horrified. I want you to be terrified of sitting on your ass and doing nothing. That is what I want you to be afraid of waking up in 6 days or 6 weeks or 6 years or 60 years and being no closer to your goal. You've made no progress. That is the horror. That is the nightmare. That is what you need to be truly afraid of. Being stagnant. So, get up and go. Take the risk, take the gamble, take the first step, take action. And don't let another day slip by. And I think that's all I've got for tonight. And if you got something out of the podcast tonight, you want to hear some more, well, then maybe you should go ahead and support the podcast. And Echo, how can the troopers out there best support the podcast?
Well, the initial way is to support yourself at the same time. And that is to supplement. Onnit has the best supplements. It's one thing to say they have the best supplements because I like them, but they for real have the best supplements. Like the legit, Indeed. You read all the stuff about it, it's straight up the best. Anyway, if you want 10% off there, so support your wallet as well. So you're supporting podcasts, yourself, and your wallet. 10% off. Onnit.com/Jocko. Yep. Solid. Also, if you want to passively support, you can do the Amazon click-through. That's you go to one of the websites, jockopodcast.com or the Jocko store. There's an Amazon link on the top. Now we have international. Because every once in a while, like people who are overseas or international, hey, what about this? Because it's a long story, but nonetheless,
but
we have
not everywhere overseas. It's Canada,
basically,
England.
When I started the ones that people have actually told me, like, hey, we're here in the UK, we want to, be down with the thing or whatever, and so awesome. I did those, and so those are up on both the websites as well. Thanks for hitting me up with that, by the way.
Overseas support. Appreciate it.
Yes, fully. So dope. And also, speaking of Amazon, the new Trooper tool. That one's good. That's pretty. It's a cool little tool. Thanks again, Brady, for that one. IT genius. And Jiu Jitsu student, by the way.
Boy.
Nonetheless, it's like this tool. You just click it. You go. There's a link to it on things called the Jocko Podcast Trooper Tool Chrome extension. That's what it's called.
Awesome. You
click on the thing. You just like you click on the thing. If you want to, you click on the thing. It shows up. It's a little icon, Jocko's head, and you can even hide that if you don't want it on your browser or whatever. You just hide it if you don't want it there. But I think it's kind of cool. It's up there, or whatever. Anyway, it makes you go to Amazon. It helps it go through the affiliate link, so you don't have to go through the website anymore. It does it automatically for you. I think it saves some time.
Right.
Also, of course, subscribe to the iTunes and YouTube. I think we're going to pump some more value in YouTube. Put some outtakes on there, I think.
I like that. I like where you're coming from.
Yeah, subscribe to the YouTube.
Subscribe to the YouTube channel. That would be cool. So we know that you're out there and you're going to receive these things that Echo's putting together.
Yeah.
And then also the Jocko Podcast store.
Yeah. If you like shirts, if you wear shirts.
Was it Jocko Store?
JockoStore.com.
JockoStore.com.
Yep.
Some cool T-shirts. I think they're cool. I still have yet to see one in the wild, not someone I know. So I'm looking forward to seeing that somewhere in the world, somewhere on planet Earth.
I am thoroughly enjoying the pictures that people send.
Yeah, they're awesome.
You know what's funny? The heather gray, right? The gray. It's like that's the kind of shirt, like, a lot of lighter colored shirts. They get real like dark if you sweat in them or whatever, Right. So there'll be like pictures where I don't even know why I think this is funny, but it's interesting because the other one is charcoal gray. That's a dark gray. So they'll be like, yeah, I got my discipline t-shirt, and I see the bottom like looks like a stripe. I'm like, wait, what? That's weird how the lighting is. Or so there's a stripe on the bottom of your shirt, but it's not the charcoal gray one. It's they were getting after it.
It's an indication of getting after it.
Yes, very much so. Anyway, I don't know why they thought that was funny, but it looks funny. Not funny like I'm laughing at them, but it's interesting how it looks like a shirt and it's like an optical illusion. Anyway, JockoStore.com. There's some other shirts on there if you like them. Coffee mugs and stickers.
Awesome.
Bumper stickers.
Also, if you like the podcast and you want more of this information, there's a book that I wrote with my brother Leif Babin. It's called Extreme Ownership. You can order it through Amazon. Or you can get anywhere books are sold. It's available in hardcover, digital, and audio format. And the audio format, Leif and I actually read, so get some of that. If you want to talk to Echo and I, you can find us on the interwebs at Twitter. Echo is at Echo Charles. And I am at Jocko Willink. We're also on the Facebooky and some of that Instagram. I got a Snapchat thing. I signed up for it or whatever, but I haven't done anything with it yet.
Yeah.
So I got to explore that. But, man, the social media stuff takes some time. And I can't. If you want me, find me on Twitter. That's the best way. Ask your questions on Twitter. Hit me up on Twitter. That's the most common thing that I use. I do check Facebook. I mean, I read everything that has ever been sent to me. I've read. I might not have responded to it because I literally can't respond to every single thing that gets sent to me. Which is what's nice about on Twitter. I can just hit that I like it, so that people know, like, oh, he read it. Cool. On Facebook, I read it, but there's nothing to press to say I read your thing. So maybe I should figure something out like that. But anyways,
you're solid on Twitter. Like, you get back to people and stuff, which is cool. Because there's some people where you can tell it's not them. It's like their social media person.
Yeah, well, it's me. And whatever. I was just out where I just was. There was very limited internet, so I was able to get like a tweet out in the morning, a couple tweets out in the morning. But when I'd go to start responding, it was 3 minutes to look at the tweet from somebody. So I'm backed up right now for like 4 days behind or something like that. 5 days behind, actually.
Yeah, but see, even just saying that, like, that you're like backed up, it means like that you're engaged, man. That's good.
Yeah, but even then, I was reading, and I do, man. If you send me something on Twitter, I'm gonna see it. I'm gonna read it. I might not respond to it directly, but I might.
Bro, I've had a day, actually more than once too, but I'm remembering a very specific time, a day where I wasn't going to go to Jiu Jitsu. I wasn't going to go. I was, today's rest day or what, I don't know, whatever. I wasn't going to go.
We call that weakness.
Maybe. Call it what you want. Nonetheless, when you see pictures of, I don't know the name of the specific person, but I saw a picture, first day of Jiu Jitsu. And I'm like, how you get that feeling when, like, let's say you weren't at Jiu Jitsu and I took a picture of me on the mat saying, I'm here without Jocko. I'll do that every once in a while to, like, my friends. Or I'm here without Jocko. And you kind of like, you have this feeling like, dang, I wish I was there right now just to whatever. I kind of got that feeling.
That weird competitiveness you were talking about earlier?
No, it's more like, I want to be there with you. Maybe a little bit. Oh, by the way, I don't know if you knew this. Like, guys will be like, hey, I want to come visit you at the gym or whatever, right? And to me, it's like,
had a guy showed up when I was out of town.
Yeah, and that's awesome. I say the days, like, I go on these days typically and whatever, so just hit me up, whether it be on Twitter or whatever, if you are in town. But he did, and because the reason that's significant, one of the main reasons, what I said too.
Where was he from?
Arizona. So Arizona, his name's AB. AB, the man, showed up, rolled money. Yeah, so because a lot of people in life, I'm not saying just on Twitter, I'm just saying in life, they always will be like, hey, you do jiu-jitsu? Yeah, I'm going to come by and you can show me, or I'll roll or whatever. And I would say a good 95 to 99% of the time, they don't come.
Yeah, well, a lot of times they're hitting you up from places farther away than Arizona.
No, I'm even talking about, like, before the podcast and stuff. I'm saying, like, your friends, friends or whatever,
people,
you do. Hey, I'm gonna come check it out. Sounds cool, And they never
had this dude rolled before. AB,
yeah.
Was he a jiu-jitsu player?
Yes, yeah. He's a
jiu-jitsu player.
He was like a 3 straight white belt or something like that.
Dang,
we did know
coming up.
Yeah, but cool, nice guy,
That's awesome.
Anyway, he was cool. What's up, AB, the man? Thanks for coming.
Yeah. And obviously, I just want to give a shout out. We talked about some soldiers today, but I want to give a thanks to all the police out there. I hear a lot from police officers all over the country, and thanks to you guys for doing your duty to keep us safe. Same thing for the firefighters. I've actually hear a lot from there's all kinds of firefighters, and all you guys that are protecting us on the home front, obviously much appreciated. And then, of course, the military folks out there, especially those that are deployed right now, taking the fight to the enemy. Be aggressive and crush them, and we'll see you when you get home. And finally, to all the Jocko podcast troopers out there, thank you for the support across the board with all this. We appreciate it. And what we really appreciate more than anything is you out there in your life taking ownership of your world and getting after it. So until next time, this is Echo and Jocko. Out.